All right, good afternoon, everybody. Time to get going. I believe, is it 7 o'clock yet? Okay, let's get the show on the road. Oh, we get music. Thank you for bringing that along. Firstly, thank you very much for coming. This is a little warm-up event, as it's become now for us, a sort of a regular event here in Sedona. I guess the last time I was here was 2 years ago, and this is to kickstart our USA tour. Next weekend we're at Contact in the Desert, which is always an exciting event to see what all the other clever people have to say, and then after that we're going to another 16 cities from all over the USA. So this is Sedona is always the guinea pig, the trial run. So I hope you realize you're here for 7 hours. I spent the whole day today editing down, I'm not kidding, editing down like a 7-hour presentation into 2.5 hours. We'll see by the end of this evening how well I've done. So welcome and thank you for being here. My name is Michael Tellinger. For those of you that are new, I hope you enjoyed the ride. For those of you that have seen my work before and this research before, I hope you find something new and stimulating and exciting and inspiring in what we're going to share here this evening. I'd like to thank once again Chuck and Alyssa for being here and filming this event as they've done a few times already. For Neil, thank you Chuck and Alyssa. And to Neil Gower from Portal to Ascension for helping manage and run this tour with us, the second time now. And to my beautiful fiancée, Emma, for putting up with me. Okay, so let's get this party started. In case you didn't know what books I have written, that's some of them. Some of them have been translated into other languages and they have different covers and they look confusing, but in essence they're more or less the same thing, with a few edits here and there. So they are available in the foyer. If you haven't got one, you should be ashamed of yourself. Get one immediately. This table is always a little bit low. Every year that we come here, so next year I'll get a higher table. So I like to remind you once again that we like to connect the dots. And if you don't connect the dots from the past to the present, everything just feels and seems a bit messy. Because without connecting the dots, the information remains separated, compartmentalized, you can't connect things, you don't understand why this is happening and why that was happening and so forth. So one of my passions is finding a way to connecting the dots, and I've been sticking with this image for a long time because I like it, and it reminds me of looking out into the vast unknown and finding new information that we can make sense of the longer we look and the more we allow ourselves to absorb the knowledge and information that comes to us from the deep void and from that morphogenetic field. What I find fascinating, however, is that every year we find new discoveries. Every year there's something new, stuff that we didn't know about, old things that are new to some people and old to new people, but constantly new discoveries. It just boggles my mind how this flow of new discoveries never stops. Just like, for example, 60,000 structures in Guatemala uncovered in the last 2 years or whenever it was. It's just ridiculous, right under our noses. And these are just examples of things, and this might be old news to some people, but again, new news to others. And so I'm just giving you a few examples of things that I find interesting and surprising. This is a phenomenal structure in Turkey, the Norsun Tepe structure, which is no longer visible because it's now flooded, it's underwater. But if you just look at that, clearly this is some serious stuff that was going on here, ancient people doing interesting things. The mysterious towers in China, more than 800 towers that are found in China that they have no idea what they were built for. And and all kinds of speculations about these towers. And just some interesting ancient ruins in Africa, in Gambia, the Wasu stone circle ruins, and then other interesting stuff like the Baltic Sea anomaly that people have marveled about. What is this thing? Is this a crashed UFO? Is it a structure? What is this thing? And then obviously more pyramids. Pyramids found all over the world. Some people might have missed this pyramid that was announced a few years ago, the Garut pyramid in Indonesia, and thousands of pyramids around the world. That just seems to me that ancient civilizations just built pyramids on a scale that we can't even begin to imagine. The interesting structures in Jordan, the stone circles in Jordan, that just boggle the mind, scattered throughout the deserts in the Near East and the Middle East. And it's not just in Jordan, it's over Saudi Arabia, it's all over Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. That entire area of the Middle East, the Near East, is just filled with ancient stuff that nobody is talking about. Very few people are talking about. And then in the most obvious places, like in Ireland, which, by the way, you probably know, is filled with ancient stuff, and it is so mysterious and so old, and it's right under our noses. Ireland could possibly end up being one of the most critical and important places of ancient civilizations, but it's not necessarily looked at in those terms. In Ireland, the drought in the UK and in Ireland recently has uncovered some phenomenal new structures that have never been seen before. This is not a very good photograph, but you can see that circle in the crop field here that suddenly appeared right next to Newgrange. And then you go right next door into Wales, and they find ancient Roman ruins in Wales that they've never seen before. So the stuff just keeps popping up every year, every month, new stuff pops out. And unfortunately, the mainstream media, as we all know, is not covering this stuff. It always finds the back page of some magazine or some interest group and so forth. And unfortunately, we will not know much about this because there's just never enough money going around to go and investigate the stuff, and people have to do this on their own with their own little savings and so forth. And one of the structures that has blown my mind over the past several years and is becoming more and more significant in all of this ancient mystery is what's known as the Eye of the Sahara in Mauritania. And this is truly a spectacular place. The next photograph is even more dramatic. And this is, at this stage, seems that it is, at the moment, the most probable place of the mythical Atlantis. The sizes are virtually identical to the description that Plato gives us. And it is, just so happens to be, this is a map from 450 BC by Herodotus, and it just so happens that it is exactly where he put the Atlantis mountains, and this is right there in North Africa. This is an old map that shows Africa very distorted at the bottom there. Europe at the top, you see the Mediterranean and the Black Sea and so forth. And then there you can see the Atlantis mountains right here. And that's exactly where it is today. Mauritania, about 400 kilometers inland. And when you start looking at that, and then you go a little bit further east from there, and you start finding some very strange structures imprinted into the earth. Can you see that PC grid? Can you see it very faintly there? If you can't see it, let me zoom in for you. What the hell is going on here? This is just the weirdest stuff. You know, at first I thought it was some sort of a mistake, and it's not. This is actually in the earth. So weird things are going on, and we're just waking up to it and realizing that we may in fact actually be inside a giant, virtual reality computer game when you start seeing things like this, and that the surface of the earth is actually just like the surface of the PC board. And if you look at this, it starts to play games with your mind, and I'm going to leave you to go and wonder and marvel about this yourselves. So it definitely is, the more we learn, the less we know, and the more confused we get, and the more exciting it becomes as well, because it does allow us to imagine and wonder. And while we have new discoveries all the time, unfortunately, these new discoveries are equally matched by an ongoing hidden history. And this is just what is blowing my mind even more so now than ever before. We now know unquestionably that history is not just written but rewritten by the victors. And often it's the most evil ones. Most often it's the most evil ones that are responsible for that. None more evil than this guy here. Most of us are not aware of it, that this is one of the most devious, mischievous, evil human beings that has graced our world for the last, in the past 100 or 200 years. So history is rewritten by the victors and also those who control the media, especially today. And it is really critical for us to come to terms and become okay with the fact that pretty much everything we've been told is a lie. And the lie is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It is quite spectacular. The manipulated history that we find seems to be created and recreated for us on an ongoing basis. And this is what's becoming a little disturbing, but at the same time not surprising, what's going on here. And the question basically that I've been asking myself is our recent history actually being changed and erased right under our noses? And I must tell you that even a year ago or 2 years ago, I would have thought that this was a nonsensical idea, because I know what happened 10 years ago and I know what happened 20 years ago and that. But you know, there are ways and programs and frequencies that can manipulate us, that can make us do things subconsciously, that can make us buy stuff in shopping markets and in shops. There are tools and technologies that exist that can erase our brain and replace our memories. And it's quite possible that some entities, some group of beings that have knowledge of this technology are actually just playing these games that are constantly, wiping out our memories and replacing our memories with new memories, and we start remembering things differently. So is it just our imagination, or is this real? And this is where we get to this thing called the Mandela effect. How many of you have heard of the Mandela effect? So if you haven't heard of it, please go look at it, because it is a reasonably disturbing thing. At first I thought, it's just another one of those weird things that people have come up with. But my dear friend Peter Herman in Germany has written a book on this, and he's done an amazing amount of research. And this is becoming a more and more real thing to pay attention to. It seems to me that pretty much all of history that we have has been so manipulated and so changed right under our noses that it's almost impossible for us to know what is real, what's real history and what's manipulated history, what is fabricated history, and so forth. And the reason I say this is because if they can change the facts and the emotions of an event as recent as this, the Second World War, if they can turn the villains into heroes and the heroes into villains, and we know absolutely nothing what went down in the Second World War. Just because we have been given and shown some events through mainstream media and television doesn't mean that that's what really happened. And once you start researching and going into much deeper knowledge and information about this particular event, World War II, you start realizing that pretty much all the people we thought were the villains were actually the good guys, and the good guys were the real villains. So I'm going to leave that to you. Please go and do some research, and you'll be staggered and absolutely blown away about how little we really know about this event and what really went down. There's a book that I may recommend if you haven't read it or heard of it. It's called Tell the Truth and Shame the Devil. That's going to send shivers up your spine. It's going to give you sleepless nights like it did me. And for months, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and go, okay, what's going on here? Why is this happening? The other interesting thing is that there are places that we don't know about, that we should know about, like the Towers of Bologna in Italy. This is a drawing from the 1700s. How many of you have seen the Towers of Bologna? That until 200 years ago, the city of Bologna had more than 200 towers, just up to 50 meters tall. They're all gone. And then suddenly you start stumbling upon an empire that until the late 1800s was a well-known empire across the world. You look at the old maps and you see the Tartarian Empire, one of the most important global empires, and then suddenly gone. We hear nothing about Tartary and the Tartarian Empire and what happened to them. And you start seeing that, or realizing that that history is literally changing right under our eyes. Recent history, it's like just being wiped out. We know nothing about it. Right here in the USA, the destruction of ancient buildings. You start looking what's been going on here. The Columbia Exposition in Chicago in 1893. It was the biggest global fair of its time, ever. 1893, they built all these incredible fancy buildings in Chicago. There's another picture of it, huge statues that are like 10 stories high, statues and buildings for this particular expo. And then afterwards they broke it all down, tore it down. There's only one building that's remaining in Chicago from this huge exposition, the Columbia Exposition in 1893. And then further interesting stuff here, right here under our noses in the USA, is the mythical city of Norumbega that appears in all the maps throughout the 14th, 15th century, 1500s, and then suddenly disappears. Norumbega, it's well known to all the mariners in ancient times, and it was a city. I mean, the descriptions of this place that was paved with gold at all these places, and all the mariners in that era talk about it, and it appears in all their maps. And so, just a suggestion: go away, look at Tartaria, and look at these events that seem to have happened right under our noses in the most recent of times, and we seem to know nothing about them. There seems to have been a giant flood, a mud flood that's covered most of the northern hemisphere. That there's evidence that it may have wiped out entire cities, entire countries, and then there was like a reboot or a restart. It is weird, people. Things are getting really freaky and very, very weird. And you see evidence of these things all over the place. Clearly, there was a lot of mud that went and did this kind of thing, right? And you see very large buildings that, with the 2 or 3 bottom floors are just completely covered in mud, and then they just leave them like that, and they create the entrance on the higher floors to that same building. Things are very, very strange. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that if the news that we have coming from the media is fake, imagine how wrong all of our history is. And this is why when people start claiming, oh, I know this, I've read these books and I've read that book and I know history, I'm a professor of history or this and that, it's just like, well, just because you've read a few books means absolutely nothing. And the reason I can make the statement because of the discoveries I'm making in the mountains of South Africa, of the fossils that I'll be talking about, that are just scrambling the timelines. It's making me have to pretty much wipe out everything I thought I knew and go back to the beginning and say, what the hell is going on here? Because this is not anywhere in any history book. I've not heard about this, I've never imagined this, and yet it's right under our noses. I'm walking on it, I'm picking it up, and it's undeniable. So, and all of this, the fake news and this potentially fake history is just adding to the great human puzzle and making us even more confused about who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. And I guess the journey just gets more and more exciting because it gets stranger and stranger by the day. And but our authorities and our very clever people at the institutions keep telling us that the ancients were primitive, and they looked something like this. If you've seen my lectures before, you know this. And they built countless megalithic structures with their very primitive tools, like we can build them today. And they left behind these incredible places from times that we cannot remember, and we have no idea when these things actually happened. Some of them we speculate, and we're probably very wrong. And they dragged large blocks up mountains and built platforms because they had nothing better to do. They got together and built giant things like this because they needed to bury some guy. Right? And they carved statues because they had nothing better to do. And they went on tops of mountains and built large things like this because it just... They had an extra hour at lunchtime. And you go to Mount Sharia in Siberia, and that's just ridiculous. I mean, look at the size of these blocks and these structures in Siberia. And realize that wherever you go in the world, there are mysterious ancient civilizations, that weird things, and we really don't know much about the motive. We recognize what they've done. We're surprised by what they've done. And I think you know by now I've figured out why they could do all this stuff, if you haven't figured it out yet. They could have achieved all of this because they didn't have jobs. They didn't have to wake up every morning and go to a job, and you know, they had all this time on their hands. And that's the beauty about this thing, you know, carving entire cities out of bedrock like this. You know, this is just something, it's not something that you get together one day and say, oh, let's carve a city out of a mountain. Okay. Platforms like this and underground structures like this that are covered in Egypt just to hide it. And Borobudur, which is just obviously such a powerful resonating thing. Anyone that knows anything about sound and resonance takes one look at this and go, okay, I know exactly what they're doing here. And apparently they did all this with ropes, pulleys, hammers and chisels, because that's how they did it. What's interesting, as you may have noticed, many of these places, if not all of them that you've just seen, and there are countless more, all of them seem to be in the Northern Hemisphere. And that is a huge mystery. But unfortunately, the discovery of the ancient ruins of Southern Africa has just now completely blown that apart, because now that is no longer the case. And the attention has shifted in the last 11 years since I've started talking about these to the ancient ruins of South Africa and Southern Africa. And just to show you a little video, if you haven't seen this, I don't think I've shown this before. So, is this still working, the microphone? Yes. Can you still hear me? Okay, just to some of the photographs, if you haven't seen these before. The stone circles of Southern Africa have become one of the most interesting, mysterious, and unbelievable discoveries of ancient archaeology, ancient civilizations. Not just because they are so amazing to look at and remarkable, but because they opened a door and they gave us, especially me particularly in person, very important clues as to what the ancient civilizations are doing and what technology they used. And that's actually been the big breakthrough to get to a deeper understanding of how smart and advanced the ancient civilizations were. And when you start noticing these flower-shaped structures, that's when it gets really interesting. And we'll talk a lot more about that, the flower-shaped structures. Channels, notice that these are not standalone structures. They're all connected by these channels that connect them, thousands of miles of channels, like they look like wires that connect all stone circles together. And then you can see that weird spider's web effect around it. No stone circle stands alone. They're all connected in this very large grid. And basically what you're looking at here is what has now been identified or recognized as the largest cluster of stone ruins anywhere on Earth. There might be others, but at this moment they haven't been discovered. So as of right now, until recently, Southern Africa had very little in ancient civilization or ancient ruins, and suddenly that's just all been turned on its head. Now suddenly we have the largest cluster and the largest concentration of mysterious stone ruins anywhere on Earth, and that has just blown the door wide open. How many are there? More than 10 million of these structures throughout South Africa and Zimbabwe. It is quite staggering. 10 million is not a small number. This is an insanely huge number. So whoever was doing this was doing it for a very specific reason. There must have been a very important reason for them to do this. This is not something you put together because you've got nothing better to do. So when we get to the reason why they did this, I think this is when it starts to get really interesting, because this goes way beyond what we could comprehend in a world of money, greed, corporations, lunchtime, car washes, drive-ins, etc. Flagship ruin. Where is the flagship ruin? The flagship ruin among these, you know by now, is known as Adam's Calendar. And this ruin was luckily rediscovered by Johann Heine in 2004, and it is now recognized as the oldest working megalithic sun calendar on Earth. It's still accurate. It still works. That's the most amazing thing. If you went there and you actually drew the lines on that stone where Johann is standing there, if you drew the line as the sun sets, if you haven't seen this before, let me explain quickly. This stone casts a shadow on that one, and as the sun sets on the summer solstice, the shadow ends right here, and then it moves every day as the sun sets. The shadow moves across until the winter solstice, and it reaches that edge, and that's the 1 year, and then it moves back again. So it's still accurate, except the calendar is broken. It's really old, and it's probably older than any other ancient site that we have seen to date. And Baba Credo Mutwa, the famous Zulu shaman, was initiated there in 1937. He calls it Inzalo Yelanga, or birthplace of the sun, where humanity was created by the gods to be slaves in the gold mines. So this is nothing new for people that are familiar with the Sumerian texts and the narrative of Anu, Enlil, and Enki, and the creation of a species to be slaves in the gold mines. Well, guess what? The African shamans are very, very well aware of this. And they know that whole period of human history. They are aware of the cloning of a species. And they are aware of the fact that Adam's Calendar, or Inzalo Yelanga, is the place where that event actually took place. So you can't make this stuff up. This knowledge is held by knowledge keepers for thousands and thousands of years. And this is why oral history is so much more important than written history. Because you can take a book and you can burn it. You can delete information, you can erase videos, you can remove video and books and audio stuff, but oral tradition and oral history is critical. If it wasn't for oral tradition and oral history, from the Vedas to the shamanic knowledge has been handed down by people for thousands and thousands of years, that have been pretty much taught to recite this like a parrot, because that's what happens often. You sit down in these schools and you recite these things so you remember it and you don't forget, and you don't change the facts, and you don't change it according to your own sort of liking, or if you've had too much to drink. So this is why the handed down oral tradition knowledge is so critical. And if it wasn't for that, we'd probably have very little. If we go back and talk about how history has been rewritten by the victors, if it wasn't for oral tradition, we'd probably have nothing to go by. So Adam's Calendar, in case you haven't seen it before, is a little 3D reconstruction. It is aligned with all the major, north, south, east, west, etc. Obviously, solstices, equinoxes, and also aligned with Orion, the rise of Orion, over those 3 stones over the edge. And not only the rise of Orion over the 3 Orion belt stones, but also the rise of Orion lines up with the pyramids that you can see down on the left there. The pyramids in the Barberton Valley that line up with many important activations, and very importantly, Adam's calendar is aligned on the 31 degrees east longitudinal line with the Great Zimbabwe, and then also with the Great Pyramid of Giza. So clearly what was going on here in ancient times is very, very important, and we're just scratching the surface. But, you know, when I first started writing and researching the stone circles in Adam's calendar in 2007. I first heard about this in about 2004, 2005, about the stone circles and the ruins in South Africa. And I was busy writing Slave Species of God at that stage. And I went, oh my God, there's all this information about these ancient civilizations and these ancient ruins in South Africa. And I knew nothing about it because there was no information available. There was no photographic evidence, nothing. And then I met Johan Heine. And everything changed, because he was the only one that was taking photographs of these ruins from the air. And then he shared all these photographs with me, and I could publish the books and start writing about it. And he rediscovered Adam's calendar. I called it Adam's calendar when I wrote that book. It didn't have a name at the time. And suddenly, we know about this stuff, and everyone is aware of this. But until I started writing about this, nobody knew about it. There was no photographic material available, nothing. And suddenly, 11 years later, here we are, or 13 years later, whatever it is. Our math is not that good tonight. So, 2007, I moved to a little town called Watervalboven, which means above the waterfall, and I started studying these stone circles. Little did I expect that this was just the beginning of a journey that I could never have predicted. And nothing could have prepared me for the discovery in January 2018, when we stumbled upon the fossils of creatures and giants that's really now changing all of history, especially in Southern Africa. This was just completely unexpected, because for 11 years at that stage I was walking on these stones and over the stones and picking them up, and you've seen me ring the stones like bells and wondering why they ring like bells and so forth. Little did I know that these were actually body parts, fossilized body parts of creatures, humanoids, reptilians, and giants as well. Just some quick images of the first several fossils that we started to collect to bring to the museum. And you start seeing things like this. You know, at first you think, oh, well, it looks like a foot, it looks like a shoe. Well, it looks like a shoe, it looks like a foot because it is. And it's in some weird leather, it was some weird leather thing, or a leather boot or something. But we have, I now have collected several hundred of fossils of different body parts, and the more you work with this, the easier it is to spot these things. So I'm just taking you on a little journey. At first it looks like a bunch of stones, and then it becomes much easier and more refined to spot them. By the way, you can extract DNA out of rock. Okay, if you don't know this, this is really critical information for you to absorb. And this has been done. Roger Spur here in the USA, he's somewhere on the East Coast. He runs Mud Fossil University on YouTube. Please go online and read a bit or watch some of his videos just to familiarize yourself with the importance of mud fossils. These are not fossils in the sense that we think about fossilized bones lying on the surface. Mud fossils are something very different. It's when a body or a tree or an animal gets trapped in water and mud. It undergoes a very different process of fossilization. And unfortunately, our geology school, our metallurgy schools, our chemistry schools know nothing about this. They don't teach this. So what I'm sharing with the people of the world now is a whole new science in geology, a whole new information on metallurgy and transformation, transmutation, petrification, fossilization, all the subjects that are being taught by people that believe they're very clever, but they actually haven't figured out what happens when mud engulfs a body and lightning strikes that particular body of water and mud. What happens then? Well, magic happens. How long would you say it takes for a fossil to form? We all have the opinion that it'll take millions of years or thousands of years, and mainstream educators will tell you it takes at least 20,000 or 40,000 years for the crystals to start forming in fossilization. Well, they'd all be wrong. A fossil can basically happen within days, sometimes within hours. All depends on the conditions. on the amount of minerals, the water, the mud, the circumstances, and how much electricity. That's the key thing, how much electricity goes into that body of mud and water and body part. There's some great examples when you start researching this. Again, I can't go into the detail. I'm just giving you the skinny here because we've got a lot of work to cover here, a lot of ground to cover here tonight. So there's a lot of information. Several universities have done these studies. They've created fossils in 4 days. In Alberta, Canada, there's a great example when they were chopping down some trees and to make space for high voltage electrical wires. One of the wires fell down. It touched one of the tree stumps that they just cut down. The next day they came back, the tree stump was fossil, completely fossilized into rock. So we don't know anything about fossilization, petrification, transmutation, metamorphosis. And this is a whole new body of research that I guess, what's his name? Malcolm Gladwell? Malcolm Caldwell? What's his name? The guy, the tipping point guy? He says that you become a master after you've done 10,000 hours in something. Well, I've done 36,000 hours of studying the stone circles, so I've gone beyond that point a few hours. And so when people say to me, have you spoken to any experts about this? I go, well, which expert should I speak to? You know, it becomes difficult. So what, just because somebody's got a degree from some university and they've been studying some crap out of a textbook, what does it make them an expert? No. Experience, hands-on experience makes you an expert. You've got to walk the talk and do the work, not regurgitate crap out of a book. That just makes you a very good regurgitator. And Roger Spur has done some remarkable work. Watch his video channel, Mud Fossil University. He has actually had DNA extracted out of several of his samples. This is, by the way, one of his rocks that he's got. This is outside, it's a rock. When he cut it open, it was actually oozing blood. This is a lung. So it looks like a rock outside. It's like a geode. You don't know that a geode is a geode until you break it open. And you go, oh my God, it's full of these little crystals. Well, the same thing. You cut it open and it's still full of blood and the internal structures of a lung. So I'm just showing you this. DNA has been extracted out of rock. And rocks and fossils form in various ways. Mud fossils are one of the most remarkable new discoveries in ancient civilized or archaeology. This is a very good, very basic introduction how to realize this is not a rock, that this is actually a fossil. You can see this piece here. This is clearly where another bone was growing out. It was cut off. And these are the areas that you get ligaments and tendons that were attached to these, and also bones that would stick out. This is actually part of a rib that broke off on the other side. That's about this wide. This here is you can see the internal structure here inside, right? Something was in there, and you can only see this on the edge of the stone, on the edge of the fossil. There was an artery or something going in there. When that rock breaks, this is the interesting thing. It has undergone such complete transmutation that you cannot see the internal structures. You can see vague indications of something going on, but it's not. You can't see internal structure. You can see it on the surface, but not when it breaks. When it breaks, it looks something like that, right? It's black, completely metamorphosized rock. In geology, it's known as Hornfels rock. I know this because 11 years ago, I had this analyzed. I had some fossils. In those days, I didn't know they were fossils. I had them analyzed, and they came back as a Hornfels rock, ringstone, with exact iron and etc. All the stuff in there. But you can see. Can you see the stuff here? There's a weird pattern happening there. That's what happens to whatever was in that body part. It takes on this pattern, and you'll see in a while how sometimes these patterns become very real when you use just simple photographic exposure. This is a rib. This is actually the very first fossil that I found. And I realized that we're dealing with fossils. That rib on the left-hand side, it's a beautiful specimen. It's about this long. And that was the thing that made me go, why is this rock this weird shape? Rocks do not form these weird shapes. And then half an hour later when I came down the mountain, I went, oh my God, that is not a rock. That's a rib. And everything changed. Here you can see this is the part where it's attached to the rib cage. That's not a very good photograph. I need to take better photographs of these so you can actually see it. This is the heart One of the, you can see the coronary arteries there across the heart. You can see where the aorta went in at the top. And here's another heart that was just lying in the, just like this. You can see the septum, the ventricles. You can see the muscle, the heart muscle underneath. I have probably about 20 hearts that I've collected. What you should take out of this information at this stage already, that internal organs and body parts were being removed from these beings and these creatures. Because this isn't, you don't just find a heart lying around by accident, right? So whatever is going on here, this started giving me an idea that ribs, people or beings and creatures and animals were being cut up and they were being butchered the way we butcher animals today and hang them up in a butchery. When last have you gone past a butchery? Do yourself a favor, and I'm not joking actually. Go past a butchery and see, look at the pieces of meat hanging there, just so that you can cognitively think about what I'm sharing with you here. This is a big thing. We do it all the time. We butcher animals, we hang them up and we eat them without realizing what they actually look like. There are 3 ribs together here. The one at the top is a really important one. It's probably one of the top ribs here. On a creature, a being, we don't know. I don't know whether this is humanoid or animal or reptilian or what it is. This is a closer look at that rib. You can see that the meat on the rib is being cut. This is cut. Somebody is busy eating this rib. We eat spare ribs today. They were eating spare ribs 200,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, however old this is. Here's a shoulder blade. We joked, we drove past this a few times. Oh, it looks just like a shoulder blade or a rack of lamb. It looks like something you'll see in a butcher shop. And it's become one of the important exhibits. There's a bone and a claw, and you'll see many more claws. Here's a hoof of some animal that no longer exists. When you look at the top of the hoof, you can see the cut marks. Can you see the saw marks here? Somebody cut off the bone that went into that hoof. It didn't break off by accident. So there was a lot of butchery going on here. These are more claws. I've got a spectacular collection of claws and spikes and teeth. And the question is why? Because you can't eat teeth, you can't eat claws, you can't eat spikes. So we're picking up so many of those. The other parts of the body, like the meat and so forth, that's obviously being consumed and eaten. But these things that you don't eat, they're all over the place. Spikes like, dinosaurs and things sticking out of the skeleton, etc. Here's a whole table of teeth. Teeth and spikes. Spectacular. Some of those might be humanoid. This is actually seems like it could be a human tooth of a humanoid that's probably about 50 times the size of us. This is a jawbone. This part of the jaw, it goes up right under your ear. That's the part that we've identified this as, except once again about 50 times the size of a human. And then here we have a finger, a fingertip. This is was cut off here. You can see the bone going in here, and the meat and the skin flapped over here, so you can't see the bone on that side. That's the top of it where the nail would have been growing. And I actually brought that along with me, and I'll pass it around so you can have a look at it. Please be careful with this. If you have sweaty hands, wipe them. If you have too much cream on your hands, please wipe your hands dry so we don't destroy this. There's the top of the finger. You can see the veins and underneath it, we were under the nail that fed the nail. That's where the bone went in. The skin and the meat flapped over here. Underneath here, look at the black there. That's the congealed blood at the bottom of the finger. This is the first part of the finger. Just a very large humanoid. And that blood down there is just spectacular. You can see the little, and you can even feel it. The skin on it's still there. It's just, so have a look at this and pass it on. And some more bones in the museum on display. Very obvious. You can see those. Once again, it takes a little while, and once your eyes open, suddenly it's like a fiesta. You just go into the mountains and you spot the stuff everywhere. Reptilian body parts. These are pieces of meat with skin attached to them. Reptilian skin. Here's a close-up of the skin. And here's a close-up of the skin and the epithelial cells growing up from underneath into the skin. Look how they form underneath here. Completely fossilized. If you take a piece of this, you send this for analysis, it'll come back as Hornfels rock. I know, because I've done this. But when I did it 11 years ago, I had no idea that I was having a fossil sampled. This is just larger reptilian skin on a rock on top of the mountain. I can't bring the rock down, it's too big. There's a giant piece of reptile lying there on top of the mountain. And here we have on display in my museum the small reptilian skin. And again, I don't know what these body parts are. Then slightly bigger reptilian skin, and then very large fossilized reptilian skin over there. Here's a beautiful example of a crocodile tail in a rock. So the whole rock is mud that is fossilized or metamorphosized into Hornfels rock, and the little crocodile tail right in it. Can you see it here? There's a little leg there. There's the tail coming down here and bends over there. If you play with the exposure, and just a little bit of exposure, you can see it a lot better. So this is an animal inside of what was in mud, and the mud and the animal, everything metamorphosized into rock together. That's spectacular. Our geologists, our archaeologists, our metallurgists, our chemists are not aware of this, that this can actually happen. When that breaks, you will not see the bones and stuff. It's all homogeneous, like that black color of that rock. This is just lying just about 5 meters away from that crocodile tail, and I was wondering what the hell why has this rock got these little bumps on it? Well, we got crocodiles, we got reptilians, we got all kinds of animals and creatures, and this is just a skin of some creature this is hippo skin. So this must have been some creature that was similar to a hippo or something. And then we get to the fascia. This is not pressure breaks or pressure, cracks created by whatever. These are fascia in the body. Fascia that hold the membranes that hold muscle together, that hold membrane, that hold our body together. Fascia, the largest organ in the body. Fascia. That's where the Roman fasci comes from. Fasci with an axe in it. It makes you stronger. One stick alone can be broken. You put a bunch of sticks together, they cannot be broken. There was a Roman symbol, the fasci. It comes from fascia. And you look at these stones like this is fascia. This is not some other weird stuff that our geologists might want to tell us. We have eggs. That's an ostrich egg, to give you an example, an idea of how big these eggs are. And then larger eggs, even larger eggs, and even bigger eggs, and even bigger eggs. And we had all kinds of creatures here, from small to large. And then we get to the weird stuff. So we start realizing they were slaughtering animals and cutting them up. This is a leg of some animal. I have no idea what animal this was. And this is just when I brought it down before I put it in the museum. This is spectacular. We see this hanging in the butchers every day. Legs of pig, legs of beef, legs of animals. Here's a bunch of them together. And some of them look a little freaky. This one here almost looks humanoid. And just to give an idea, this is, we're dealing with body parts that were at one stage just meat. And here's a little chicken leg. This is like Nando's chicken on a plate. I don't know I know some of you might know what Nando's is. Nando's is a fast food chicken place. You don't know what kind of chicken places you have here, but this is if you put this on a plate, you put some salad and potatoes with it, and spray some oil on it, people think it's a real chicken leg. And I brought that to share with you as well. Please be careful with this. You'll see the fossilized skin on it. This is just an absolutely beautiful, precious, fossilized chicken leg. When I first picked this up, I had no idea what it was. I thought, well, it's a weird looking stone. Let me bring it to the museum. And once your eyes open, you suddenly start seeing things very differently. So just have a look and pass it on. And this, what is that? You know, it's a sliced piece of meat. It's just fossilized. And pork chops. And you realize that there was some weird stuff going on here. We can't even begin to imagine. And this is where it's all at. This is just walls of mud. And this is where these animals and creatures were trapped in these, you can see the layers of mud. This is the forestry makes these roads, and we can now see how these creatures, these beings, and these body parts are trapped in the mud, thousands of years, and then the rain washes it away, and before you know, you see it. So when I say these are mountains of fossils, this is what it looks like. I literally mean mountains of fossils. You're walking on fossilized body parts. If this is not one of the biggest discoveries in archaeology, then blow me away. This is unbelievable. You can't make this up. This are claw marks or teeth marks in a little dino steak. You can see the skin, the reptilian skin, and then the two claw marks in there. Somebody was having a good chow on this little piece of dino steak. Some more examples of claws and teeth marks in what once was steak. And this is one of my favorites. This is, you can see the claw marks here. There's claw mark there, another claw mark here. And then these little claw marks or teeth nibbling at the bone marrow there. Look at that. Whatever creature is nibbling at the bone marrow right there. And that's the last sample I brought to show you. If you hold it sideways to the light, you can see the claw marks beautifully. If you hold it right under the light, then they obviously disappear. So treat these with care. And this is I don't know, this was, you can see again, you can see the reptilian skin here, and then this puncture mark into what was a piece of meat. Don't know, was it a bullet hole? Is it a spear? I don't know, what is it? And then it gets a little freakier. Just when you think you got a handle on this, these creatures get a little bit larger. And you start seeing the claw marks and the teeth marks in much larger pieces of steak. Can you see them here? And even more. More claw marks and teeth marks. And suddenly, once you see it, and you can't walk around the mountains anymore without being just absolutely blown away by what's around you. More claw marks. Those are big. Those are big teeth or claw marks in a giant piece of dino steak. And then right next to it is this guy's head sticking out of the ground. I don't know. Is that a fossilized dinosaur head? Certainly looks like it to me. You be the judge. Is this a fossilized lizard head? Large body parts, strange creatures, more bone, knuckles. Seems to me that they were cutting off the shafts of the bones and they left the knuckles behind because they didn't eat the bone, they didn't eat the knuckles, just like they don't eat the claws and the teeth and so forth. They left the knuckles and the cartilage, and they were interested in the bones, the shaft of the bones and the bone marrow. That's gone. That's the size of that one next to my foot. And then they get a lot bigger. This is David Attenborough in Argentina next to a fossilized bone. And here's a bone similar size, close to Adam's calendar, like a giant chicken bone. The interesting thing is with these fossils, once again, they are completely metamorphosized. In geological terms, this is known as dolerite. No geologist would tell you that this is a fossil until they actually get trained in recognizing this. Here's a much larger one. You can see how this is the knucklehead, this is the shaft. You can see how the fossilization took on a completely different nature, texture, as opposed to the knucklehead over there, the bone head. So the shaft was cut off here, the bone marrow, the blood coming out of there, complete different metamorphosis. And then the phallostones. The phallostones that just blow your mind. I don't know what they were doing with these phallostones. There's a whole bunch of them that I've been collecting. They're very good for dating the age of these, the phallostones. And I just recently picked up this one here. This actually looks like a real fossilized penis. You know, you can't make this stuff up. And unfortunately, for us now, and for me, the discovery of these fossils completely scrambled the timeline, because the walls of the stone circles are actually built of fossils. This is new information. So now suddenly, just when we thought we were getting smart and wise and we got it all figured out, we're back square one. What's going on? And we read the Bible and it tells us when the gods were on earth, there were giants. In the book of Leviticus, it says the giants, we were like locusts by their side. The book of Enoch, it tells us that the giants were 3,000 ells tall. 1 ell is this distance from your fingertips to your elbow. It's about 50 centimeters or half a meter. So 3,000 ells would be 1.5 kilometers. It's nearly a mile tall. So these guys were big. And by now, if you don't believe what the Bible says, I recommend you go back and you read it again. But you got to get rid of the soap opera. Get rid of the soap opera that confuses everything and read between the lines. Read the subtext. Get the real juicy stuff. It's full of very important information. We know there were giants. We got this giant footprint. And we'll talk about how this formed. You already know that fossils can happen literally overnight with the right amount of electricity and so forth. Well, this is exactly what happened here. That rock would have been a pile of wet, slurry, like concrete kind of cement, and somebody stood in it, and it just fossilized. And at first I wondered what this, is this just a carving? I'm beginning to think that this is really a large fossilized penis of a very large dude. This is not just a carving. Somebody didn't carve this out. So things are getting more and more interesting, that's for sure. And this is also near Adam's calendar with those large bones as well. And then this is a picture of the giant footprint. The footprint is right up at the top there, over there. And right underneath here is this rock that's been perfectly placed on its tip. It's been held up by 2 or 3 rocks behind it. So somebody placed it there to mark the spot of the giant footprint. And when you look at this rock closer, it starts to look like a giant heart. You can see where the aorta went in there. And from our channelings, we've been told that it is a heart. It's about a 250-ton heart of a guy about 200 or 300 meters high. And the Anunnaki, we'll be talking about the Anunnaki more. The Anunnaki were on the trail of these giants, of the fossils of these giants, because they were full of gold. And they were extracting the gold from the fossilized remains of the giants. And it keeps bringing us back to the gold. So, the more we learn, the less we know. Suddenly we look at Adam's calendar, and all the stones at Adam's calendar, believe it or not, are also fossils. This just makes this infinitely more interesting. Quickly to talk about the healing effects of the stone circles. For 11 years now, I've had repetitive feedback, people telling me how they've been cured of various diseases, from the most benign things to full-blown cancer. People have come there, they've come on a tour with us, take a journey with us, and they're cured of full-blown cancer. At first, I just discarded it. I thought, oh, these people are just making it up, or it's just coincidence. But it's now been going on and on and on, and we are starting to understand why people are being cured and healed of all kinds of diseases when they go into the stone circles. because it's all about the sound. What are the ruins all about? Sound, frequency, energy. And this takes us into a whole different section of tonight's presentation. All about sound, the infinitely powerful tool. Our ears are like little miracles of nature. We don't think about the sound around us because sound is invisible. Or is it? It happens to us all the time. Look at it. I'm talking to you. You can't see the sound moving to you. It's just this miracle that happens. I'm making a frequency with my mouth. It's hitting this very complicated structure in our bodies that we can't recreate. And yet they grow out of one single primordial cell. This intricate thing. And we can understand each other when we make these noises, these frequencies. Isn't this a miracle? Absolute miracle. So we take sound for granted because we can't see it. And yet it is the most incredible part of our anatomy that is possibly, without sound and without us being able to hear, our experience here would have been very, very different. The cochlear and vestibular nerves are very complex. They connect to both sympathetic and parasympathetic parts of our body. The nerves from our ear are connected to so many important parts of our body that we're not even aware of it. It's like when you make when you hear a loud noise, you jerk, you jump. The ears are for me, the most important part of our body. The sound. Some basic uses of sound, doctors, what do you do? What does a doctor do? The first thing he does, takes out a stethoscope to listen to your body, listen to your heart, listen to your breathing. Isn't it interesting? Just a simple thing like that. Oh, sound, wow, we don't think about it. Ultrasound, images of babies. Ultrasound, and ultrasound is getting so exact and so precise, it's unbelievable, right? The most advanced inspection of cars these days, car engines, they don't check them out, they put a sound thing on it to listen to the engine, and they hear where the problem is in the engine. It's the most advanced way of checking out whether your car is okay or not. Movie soundtracks, we know how movie soundtracks affect us. They bring out the emotion, they make us cry, make us laugh, make us fear. It's incredible how you can use sound and manipulate it. Whales and dolphins communicating with incredible songs for 20 minutes long. And bats catching insects with sound. And then light. Light. We don't associate light with sound. And that's one of the big problems we have in science and our schools, how they separate light and sound. When the two are the same. Well, they're not the same. They're inextricably connected. You can't separate light from sound. And these guys, this guy here from Veritasium channel, I forget his name, but he's got a wonderful channel with some really interesting information on it. He went and did something. I don't think he realizes how important this little video is that they did. He filmed a piece of foil without sound, no microphone on. They filmed a piece of foil and they sang to the foil. Then they processed the visual, the frames, and they extracted the sound out of the light of the picture without any sound being recorded. This is spectacular. This is unbelievably important. And that brings us to the question, what is sound? Well, what is sound? Sound created the heavens and the earth. Remember, that's what it says. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then God said, let there be light. It's important to put that into context of the sequence. Sound first, and then light. They're inextricably connected. Every sound frequency has a light frequency attached to it, and every light frequency has a sound frequency attached to it. You cannot separate them, but it's the sound and the resonance that comes first. And we often talk about, and the spiritual people talk about the light. Let the light come in. It's the light. The sound is more important. Light is a consequence of sound. Just please keep this in mind. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Source of all creation, energy, resonance, frequency. Nikola Tesla reminded us of this a long time ago. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, thinks in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And therefore, creation and sound and resonance is all connected. Energy, frequency, and thought. And then the that question, which came first? It's the chicken and the egg. Was it the energy first that created the resonance? Was it the resonance that created the energy? And we can't get beyond that veil. We just can't get there. That's the interesting thing. It's that thing called consciousness that seems to be behind everything. Cymatics shows us the shape of sound. The study of cymatics, how sound manifests into physical form and how every sound frequency has its own specific cymatic shape, its own very specific signature. Every note in the scale has its own cymatic pattern. Every sound you make has its own cymatic pattern. Everything manifests into physical form in a unique, very unique shape. And if you haven't seen this yet, very briefly, every sound frequency has its own specific shape. And watch as it changes. As it changes, it goes through like a quantum leap. It's got one shape and then suddenly it goes to the next shape. It's quite an important thing, that, actually. So you're looking at a two-dimensional manifestation of sound into physical form. Just close your ears. Don't damage your eardrums. There's one more shift. There, that's what I was looking for. All right, and eventually you won't hear it, but it doesn't mean it's not there. And it keeps going higher and higher. And just because you can't hear it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It'll keep changing patterns. The lower the frequency, the bigger the cymatic pattern, the higher the frequency, the more complex it is. So the high frequency, high energy, low frequency, much bigger patterns. And those are two-dimensional views of sound. What does sound look like in 3D? That's when it gets really interesting. Sound manifests as a toroidal field. In fact, everything manifests as a toroidal field, or torus. Torus, toroidal field, torsion fields, vortex fields, all the same thing. So when you hear people talk about torsion fields or vortex fields, or spin, or angular momentum, all these weird fancy terms that they come up with science just to try and make themselves sound really impressive. This is what they're talking about. Toroidal fields, vortex, torsion fields. That's what it is. Everything manifests. If you read this incredible book, and I really recommend you get it and read it, it is fantastic. Punk Science. Dr. Manjira Samantha Lawton shows and explains to us how everything manifests in toroidal fields. Everything is a torus, torsion, or vortex fields. And for those of you that know Greg Braden, he showed us how the beating of our hearts is actually 5,000 times more powerful than the frequencies from our brain. And every time your heart beats, it creates an electromagnetic field around your body. It first creates the sound, and the sound in the torus field around you, like that, creates a magnetic field. Moving sound creates magnetic fields, and moving magnetic fields create electromagnetic fields. There's your process. And where did we first hear this? The opening phrase of the Bible. God said, "Let there be light." Sound, magnetic fields, moving magnetic fields creates electromagnetic fields. Light is an electromagnetic phenomenon. It's a beautiful sequence of creation. And sound creates toroidal shapes. Every sound frequency, every letter of the alphabet has its own toroidal field, its own toroidal shape. And then we discover that sound is actually a scalar form of energy. This is the leading edge of science today. All the top scientists and researchers are talking about scalar, and people are regurgitating this word scalar, and they don't even know what it means. In fact, we don't even have the tools available right now in mainstream science to measure scalar energy. We call it the wrong things. We call it scalar waves. Scalar doesn't work in waves. Scalar is a continuous energy field that has it's not waves. We can't say scalar waves. So I try and say scalar energy, because when you say scalar waves, it means you're talking about it in the old paradigm. Everything is scalar, coming out of sound. Color is seen in toroidal fields like this. Color is scalar as well. And then obviously the simple things like shapes. Every time you look at a shape, it actually emits a frequency that goes into your eyes, into your subconscious, and we don't even realize how it's affecting us. Everything has a frequency, and this is why logos and images and carvings are so important. We don't realize when we look at a company's logo that it's sending us a frequency into our brain, and it's affecting us through the sound, subliminal sound of that frequency. Sound as a tool and technology, very important. I told you you're going to be the guinea pigs tonight, right? So just hang in there. Don't give up. We're about halfway through. Sound is a tool and technology. Sound creates light, it levitates, boils water, creates DNA, heals and destroys pathogens, moves beyond light. Yes, sound moves beyond speed of light. Sound moves infinitely fast. And it makes things invisible. It energizes the water that we drink and the air we breathe. Without sound, the air that we breathe would not keep us sustained. And sound is a precursor to electromagnetism. Sound creates light. Sound heals. You should know all these people. I'm just going to skip through this. Royal Rife, 1931. A lesser known George Lakhovsky, who cured all disease with his multiple wave oscillator. Anthony Holland in 2011 showed us on a TED Talk how he killed cancer with sound frequencies, all kinds of cancer cells. We know that the Egyptians used sound and the Ankh for healing. Native Americans used the medicine wheel because the cross in a circle is a fundamental shape of sound, the cymatic pattern that comes out of sound. The Ark of the Covenant was a powerful sound device. And it was a communication device that God spoke to Moses when he sat on the ark. And it was also a very powerful weapon. It defeated armies and it brought down the walls of Jericho through the low vibrations, destabilizing the stones in the walls. Sound levitates. John Keeley levitated stuff all over Philadelphia with his musical Dynasphere. Peter Davey from New Zealand boiled water with sound frequencies until he died a few years ago. Sound can be used as a cloak of invisibility. Sound can put out fires. This is unbelievable. These kids from a university many years ago now, probably like 7 or 8 years ago, show us how they put out a fire. Within a few seconds, 5 seconds, a hot oil burning fire is extinguished in a few seconds. You'd expect them to use this in fire brigades. They're not going to do that. Why? Because it's not good for business. It's not good for expansion of the money. Keep in mind, people, once again, the moment that the need for money stops, the entire financial system collapses. This is why there's this constant degradation of services, so that we constantly have more things that people need to do to fix our lives. Otherwise, if our lives are perfect, the entire global money system will collapse overnight. So they don't fix the roads, they don't do that, and they don't use technology to help us, because that means the hospitals won't have sick people and so forth. So the expansion of money will stop and the financial system will collapse. I'm now jumping tracks a bit, but this is critical for us to understand why things are getting worse and worse and not better. Because we've got all the technology to solve all the problems, but it's not good for business. And that's what the socio-economic and the capitalist system we find is the tool that drives the misery. Sound creates hurricanes. There's a patent application in 2003 for creating hurricanes. And you start wondering, all the hurricanes in the USA that cause so much devastation, is that an accident or is it actually done on purpose? It's very good for business. Sound creates supercluster galaxies. You know, this galaxy they found, they say, was rings 57 octaves lower than middle C. And this is apparently what it looks like. And once again, it looks like sand on a metal plate. And this is a key thing that I discovered. I studied pharmaceutics at Wits Medical School in Johannesburg. Not once did they teach us how the whole thing with oxygen works. You breathe oxygen in, and then it goes into your body, and then you breathe it out. Well, what happened? Which part of the oxygen did you use, or why is it no longer useful? Why do you have to breathe it out? And you realize that it's as you breathe. Put your hand to your ear and listen to your breathing, and you realize how loud your breathing is. It's actually very loud. So as you breathe, the sound of the air going into your lungs, into your trachea, and into the bronchi and the bronchioli, and eventually, by the time it reaches your lungs, it's moving faster than the speed of light. It's very, very highly energizing. So the oxygen molecules vibrate very, very high frequencies, and it's that energy that then gets used in your body. And once the oxygen molecule is stripped of the vibrational energy, it stops vibrating and you expel it. That's what happens. That's why our lungs are structured that way. It's all to do with sound. Luc Montagnier spontaneously generated DNA in water, 2011. Sonoluminescence. What is sonoluminescence? You put sound through a body of water, and suddenly a bubble filled with light appears in the water. Does that remind you of something? Once again, we have to come back to the Bible. The Spirit of God moved over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." It's just, you can't make this stuff up. So ancient ruins of South Africa have everything to do with sound. The stone circles, what are they for? You can very clearly see, but once you've studied cymatics and cymatic shapes that you've just seen on that metal plate, each one of these stone circles is just a cymatic pattern. It represents the sound frequency as it comes out of the earth at that point. We know this because we've measured it. It's not, I'm not making this up, I'm not imagining it. It's real, we've measured it many, many times. The key thing is that those frequencies keep changing. Because the stone circles are machines, they're alive, they're constantly working, and that's why the frequencies are never the same. The conditions keep changing, and they change because, remember, sound is a toroidal field, and toroidal fields are alive, they pulsate. They don't just stand still. And this is really important. Adam's calendar is the most powerful of these. It's got frequencies up into the gigahertz, very, very high gigahertz. You can't measure gigahertz in nature. It's just, you know, from stones and that, unless it's consciously constructed. And especially when you start looking at these flower-shaped patterns, these flower-shaped stone circles, and that's when we realize we're dealing with some serious advanced knowledge of technology, because we recognize that these are actually magnetrons. Magnetrons are a little magnetron this size can create a laser beam that cuts metal in a split second. Every microwave's got a magnetron about this size in it. If you go onto YouTube, go do this for yourself. You see how these kids and these guys are taking the magnetrons out of their microwaves and they're making laser guns that they're shooting at things and they're exploding things from like a distance away. You can turn the magnetron from your microwave into a dangerous weapon that can shoot airplanes out of the sky. Now, people don't know this. Now, a magnetron that's 50 meters in diameter, like the one on the left, made out of quartz rock, will generate more energy than all the power plants on Earth today. That's two independent magnetron scientists gave me that answer when I asked them. And that blows my mind. We have thousands of these magnetron-shaped structures scattered throughout South Africa among these energy stone circles. So we're looking at a giant energy-generating grid. The largest concentration of ruins on Earth, that is now the largest energy-generating grid found anywhere on Earth. So whatever they were doing with this, whatever they built it for, remains a mystery. But they obviously knew this long before Nikola Tesla rediscovered this and figured it out when he built his tower to basically amplify the frequency of the Earth and try and give the world free electricity, which he nearly succeeded. So what was this energy used for? And this is where it gets really interesting. And we go back to the Sumerian texts and the Sumerian references to the gold mining in southern Africa, and especially in a place called the Abzu. And keep in mind, again, if you're new to this, the Sumerian texts are the oldest written record of human history. Millions of clay tablets, hundreds of thousands have been translated. and deciphered. We have information from cooking recipes to astronomy to medicine to agriculture to accounting, everything, and also about the creation of the human race, the creation of a species, the hierarchical structure of the Anuna gods. And if you haven't looked at the Sumerian tablets are filled and riddled with the Anuna or the Anunnaki, the Anuna gods. Anu, Enlil, and Enki, the three primary beings in the Sumerian lives of people that created humanity. And we have Anu, the Anunnaki. Enki was the grand architect and the guy that started the gold mining in what they call the Abzu. Work in the Abzu by Enki. Abzu was given several meanings, sometimes underground, sometimes over there, and sometimes where the gold came from. And this is where we have this important reference. This is an image, a Sumerian seal of the creation of Adam. Notice how this guy has got, I thought for many years that he was holding a flask. It's not a flask, it's a cone. We get into the cones and the importance of the discovery of the cone-shaped tools. So it says, a primitive worker shall be created. Our command will he understand. Our tools he will handle. To the Anunnaki in the Abzu relief shall come. And there are many other references to the creation of this being, the species, Adamu or Adam, as a slave to work in the gold mines. And that's exactly what Baba Kreda Mutwa tells us. Adam's calendar, or Inzalo Yelanga, was the place where this creation took place, where they actually held ceremony to bring this creature into being. We read about Enki and his minds and his technology, and this is where it really gets interesting. It says, the earth splitter, Enki there established, therewith in the earth a gash to make, by ways of tunnels earth's innards to reach, the golden veins to uncover. And there are so many references to golden veins, how gold is extracted in certain mines in South Africa that is very different from how we know gold to be extracted. Gold actually sucked out of what they refer to as veins, where the gold is oozing out of the rock, not in small little speckles that they have to get out of the rock. This is spectacular. I'm not sure if I included it in this lecture. There's too much information, but I hope it's here. So I believe that this magnetron may in fact be what they refer to as the earth splitter that Enki established with, to use the energy or the laser beam or the Caesar technology. And look at that. So this is magnetron on the right, modern picture of modern magnetron, on the left ancient magnetron, and here's the Sumerian seal showing us Enki with the magnetrons all around him. I mean, that's incredible, isn't this? So plus they're holding up a grid up into the sky. There's a magnetron there. They're doing all kinds of things with magnetrons, and you'll see that these magnetrons keep featuring in Sumerian texts and Sumerian images. The stone circles were not the only ancient energy generating devices. It gets far more interesting and exciting. Obviously, all this ancient stuff is made out of rock, which is quartz, quartzite, which is silica dioxide. Quartz has memory, it conducts light and sound. This is all advanced technology. We know that you can store data in crystals and water as well. Silica dioxide, oxygen and silica and oxygen and hydrogen, water and quartz. Very important. Also in the formation of planets and solar systems, those two are the primary components, as you will find. Stone structures are basically like giant memory banks, Stone Age Silicon Valley. And we now know that all these ancient sites are just giant machines. The stone circles are really the trigger point to make us realize that all these ancient structures were just giant machines built to generate energy. For what? That remains the mystery. Right now, I can tell you that my theories are that those more than 10 million stone ruins in South Africa and Zimbabwe were most likely to terraform or create a habitable environment on Earth. The reason I say this is because many of the channels that run out of the stone circles run into the rivers and they just end in the river. And you'd wonder, why would they do that? Why would this thing run into the river? What's the purpose of that? because with magnetic fields and electromagnetic fields, you can suck the water up against the gravity, right up to the top of the mountain, where you can release it and irrigate the terraces, but also can go into the stone circles and be converted into some other form of water or oxygen released from the water, and the oxygen goes into creating a habitable atmosphere. I'm thinking that they were using the stone circles for terraforming, for creating a habitable climate on planet Earth. That's why it's such a huge, huge machine. And they went to so much trouble because they needed the Earth to be habitable. We know that these are machines because sometimes photographs like this show us that energy is still coming out of these giant machines. Stonehenge, very obvious energy device. And then these ancient sites in Egypt are just technology on a gigantic scale. The obelisk is just rings like a bell, and you realize it's an antenna. And when you start looking at these structures in Egypt, you realize too many pillars, not enough space. This is not for praying and offering food and going to pray to the gods and all that nonsense. This is all just giant technology. There you've got a beautiful amplification chamber with ringing pillars in front of it on a pedestal, and you realize that these are just temples, templates for giant circuit boards. And these guys are just building these energy devices on a scale that we can't do today because we don't have enough money and we have no idea how to do it. And they were doing things that we can't even imagine today. Giant circuit boards, macro processors. I just love this one. It's my favorite. And then devices like this, obviously. And you realize that we're dealing with a time in human history that was very, very different from our lives today. This is Abu Ghraib, just south of, I think it's south of the Great Pyramids of Giza. This is a spectacular place. It's ridiculous. If ever there was something that looks like Star Trek, Beam Me Up Scotty place, this is it, right? See, this is the pyramid. It's on a platform, and in front of the pyramid that's badly destroyed, you see that square thing there? Well, this is a close-up of it. I mean, it looks just like that Beam Me Up thing out of Star Trek, made out of alabaster quartz. And when you go to South America, Sacsayhuaman, there's just another circuit board on top of a mountain. There's another look at it. Borobudur, Indonesia, just amplifying sound frequencies, shooting it up into the sky with a central beam at the top. And this all takes us to Caesar technology. Caesar technology that was only introduced to humanity in 2009, as opposed to laser beams. Caesar beams, infinitely more powerful. But it seems that human sound was used to amplify and start these circuit boards. Even the Parthenon in Greece, that was an ancient circuit board. It's really badly destroyed. And they had these amphitheaters. They squeeze a bunch of people in there, fill them with fear, make them clap their hands and whatever they do, and all these religious sites as well. All that energy gets channeled down these vibrating pillars and into the circuit board, and it starts the circuit board through sound, whatever that circuit board was doing. And we find these circuit board amphitheater connections all over the world. Amphitheaters, circuit boards, whatever they were doing with that energy remains a mystery. There's another amphitheater connected to a circuit board on top of the mountain there. You can see it badly destroyed. Here's another one in North Africa, in Algeria. Here the circuit board the amphitheater is right in the heart of the ancient circuit board. And this doesn't stop there. The secret sound activation continues in medieval times and continues in modern times. Temples have just become churches. And you will see the importance of the structures of these churches with the conical towers, the cone-shaped tools that focus the sound into Caesar beams. This stuff is just so brilliant. Our sound is being harvested as energy. It's that simple. Anytime you build a circle, pyramids, obelisks, or domes and cathedral towers, these are all harvesting devices for amplifying and harvesting sound and focusing sound. And this is why all cathedrals, all major churches, all major castles around the world are always built on very powerful energy lines, ley lines, very energetic places around the world. Every time there's a Catholic Church cathedral, it's always on a very strategic point. And this is why the mystery of the medieval cathedrals is such an important thing to crack. Right? Just if you speak to architects today, I don't know if there are any architects here, but architects today just marvel at how these guys built it. With the tools they had in the year 1000 or whenever it was 10 something, when they built these in the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, we couldn't build it today with those kind of tools. We'd struggle to build it today with modern tools. This is just spectacular. Have a look at the inside. It's so obvious what's going on here. Giant acoustic chamber with a dome on top of it, with vibrating pillars from the resonance of the people clapping their hands or the fear or shouting or singing, whatever they were doing, going up these pillars into the dome. And what's on top of the dome outside of the cathedral are these spires that send the frequencies up into the sky. I mean, this is just so obvious what's going on here, but it gets even better. Now you start looking at the extra features in these cathedrals, and you realize that they're also using this shape of light that amplifies the acoustic effect inside the chamber. Can you see the shape of these windows? Circular, very important, not square, circular or oval, etc. And we start seeing very obvious magnetron-shaped windows. And once you know that light and sound are inextricably connected, if you send light through a magnetron shape, it will create a magnetron effect. The shape of the shape of the window will take the frequency of the light and amplify it because it's in the shape of a magnetron. It's spectacular. So the light from outside goes through the magnetron structures into the church, into the cathedral. It amplifies it because the cathedral is just an ambient chamber. And now you got this magnetron amplification of the light that shoots out the spires and through the top of the cathedral. It's unbelievable. This is Notre Dame. It's like laser transfer. You can take the information of an egg from a salamander or a lizard. You put a laser beam through a fertilized lizard egg, and you point the laser at the infertile frog egg, and the frog will become a lizard. The light takes the information and deposits it from one to the other. That's what happens. The light comes in through the window, takes the information of the light and amplifies it inside the chamber. This is just spectacular. Magnetron-shaped windows in cathedrals is suddenly a dead giveaway that this is very, very advanced technology that we're only waking up to now. It's just too beautiful. Once you realize what's going on, we go, oh my God, we are so bloody dumb. We are just like literally lambs to the slaughter. We're just being lied to, abused, eaten, slaughtered, tortured. Unbelievable. This is a woman by the name of Annie in Sweden that took this picture of a church. Look at that beautiful torus. Look at the energy coming out of that, creating a torus effect. As every now and then it just shows itself to us very obviously. And we suddenly realize that city grids in cities are just the modern day circuit boards generating huge amounts of sound. Human beings never stop making a noise. Cities are constantly noisy. They keep pushing up sound into the sky through the high skyscrapers. We are sources of energy because we never stop freaking making a noise. And suddenly, when Morpheus holds up the battery in the Matrix and he says, we are the source of energy, you go, I get it, dude. I finally understand what you mean. All respect to you. When the guys made the Matrix, they knew exactly what they were talking about. Wherever they got their information from is very, very interesting. And that brings me back to places like Bologna. These hundreds of towers that have now been destroyed, gone. This is a very, very early picture of Bologna with many of the towers that have already been gone. But look at the early image, the drawing from 1700s of Bologna. There's a dome over the city. There's a wall and a dome over the city. What's going on here? You know, this is not normal kind of stuff going on here, people. Right? And being a musician, Having played my guitar in the 70s, very, very loud, every musician in the 70s had only one thing in mind, and that's to get a valve amp. And it just reminded me of that, you know, where they just, is this just a gigantic version of a valve amp, creating huge, amplifying the sound of the people in that place, and I don't know, using it for whatever they use it for. A giant valve amp out of a city. And that brings us to the ancient tools and artifacts. But should we have a little break? Do you guys want to have a little break? All right. Let's have a little break, and we'll resume in 10 minutes or so. All right, let's carry on here. So ancient tools and artifacts are really critical, because this is just, now that we see how these guys use sound and light and just their supreme knowledge of energy and all that stuff, vibrational techniques, we have to come to terms with the fact that when we find tools like this, that these are highly significant. This is not just a little fly-by-night, some stones with holes in them, it's not significant, it's just accidental. Well, that's unfortunately where all our so-called scholars go wrong. Because these Taurus stones, and especially Taurus stones with the cone-shaped tools combination, become very, very important. This is critical stuff. The mysterious cone-shaped tools that I started collecting in 2007 already. I have no idea why I started collecting them. I just subconsciously knew they were highly significant. Thank God I started to pick them up and just bring them to the museum. Then I realized that these cones are all over the world. The most important missing link in archaeology that all our archaeologists just have missed. I don't know of any archaeologist, I have not read anyone other than me that talks about the significance of these cones. And quite frankly, I've been doing this for a decade already, and no one has picked up on this other than me. This blows my mind. It just shows you how closed-minded that industry is, or that fraternity is, or whatever you call it. Cones in England and Australia, Mayan cones, 2 cones, important. Sometimes they hold 2 cones. The fact that you've got 2 cones, highly important, very important. Here, Sumerian statue that they're healing, this dude is healing someone with cones. And golden cone-shaped hats for special ceremony, inaugurations to bestow powers or suck energy from someone, who knows. You know, isn't it interesting that wizards have cone-shaped hats, right? Yeah, really? Where did that come from? And then their staves are cone-shaped. And Ed Leeds Cullen that built Coral Castle was seen levitating the stones with it was said with ice cream cones. He was levitating them with ice cream cones in his hands. That's good enough for me. They're cones. And then we have these bird-shaped beings that hold cones in their hands. And look at his arm. So he's holding a cone here. There's another cone here. Can you see? And this cone is going into what? This weird magnetron shape on his, as a wristwatch. That's not a wristwatch. It's a seriously powerful. If a magnetron this size can make a laser beam that can blow shit up that we make from a microwave, I think these guys were slightly more efficient in their use of these magnetrons. So whatever that magnetron in his arm was for, it was highly significant. We're just rediscovering it. And then we find pictures in Egypt of cones and magnetrons. Now, our poor Egyptologists have got no bloody idea what these things are. They still say that these are just what do they call them? Ornamental or some crap. There's always some BS story. You've got no clue what's going on. You know, it's just a close-up. Cones and magnetrons from Egypt. So we got cones from all over the world, magnetrons in the cathedrals, magnetrons in stone circles and ruins in South Africa, cones all over the place. I think we should start paying attention to this stuff, right? And then we find cones in the Rosicrucian Museum here in San Jose, California. And these cones come from Iraq, and they're engraved, as you can see, with cuneiform text. And this cuneiform text has been deciphered, and it talks about that these cones were used in the building and the constructions of the temples of Sumer. Now, you're not going to use these as wedges under the giant 100-ton blocks. Clearly, these were used some other way, and we now know how they were used. We're dealing with Caesar technology, cone-shaped tools, toroidal fields, moving sound that creates toroidal fields that create incredibly powerful anti-gravity or levitation effects. This is well established. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And this is exactly how dragonflies and other insects fly. They use this cone and toroidal technology that's built into their anatomy. And this is why biomimicry is becoming such an important thing in modern technology and architecture and so forth. Imitating, mimicking nature, mimicking insects, mimicking trees, mimicking nature. Biomimicry. And at the wings, those things, those are not blood vessels, those are hollow tubes in their wings. And at the bottom of those tubes, they have these tiny little cones. So as they flap their wings, the frequencies go through the hollow tubes, and the hollow tube frequencies goes into the cones, and they send out Phaser beams. That's what happens when sound goes into a cone. It speeds up, speeds up. By the time it goes outside of the tip, it's moving faster than the speed of light. It's moving at what is called hypersound speeds, infinitely fast, creating giant toroidal fields that create anti-gravity effects. And this is why these bugs can fly so brilliantly and make such sharp movements and move so quickly. Have you ever seen how fast dragonflies are? Literally, I mean, they'll cross from this room, this side of the room to that room in like half a second. They'll go, whoosh. How did you do that? How is that possible? Because of this technology. And this is exactly also why Viktor Grebennikov in the 80s, this Russian scientist and inventor, built his levitation platform. And people still think this is nonsense. No, he knew about bugs' wings, how they were constructed. He figured out by putting, it looks like he's got a motorbike. If you look at close-ups of it, it looks like a motorbike thing. So basically a frequency thing, like increase the frequency. Goes down into the platform, which is filled with bugs' wings, and that frequency then obviously went through those little cones and created a toroidal field around his little levitation platform. He talks about flying this thing faster than the speed of sound without his hair being blown by the wind, because he was inside a toroidal field, right? And this, by the way, is the same technology that is used by the UFOs that have been seen that fly at incredible high speed and suddenly make a 90-degree turn left. We can't do that in Newtonian physics terms. It's impossible. But if you're in a gravity-free environment in your own toroidal field, you can do anything, like fly beyond the speed of sound, like Viktor Grebennikov, without getting blown off your little... Can you imagine standing on that thing in the wind? I've ridden a motorbike for many years of my life. Tell you what, one of the most dangerous things on a motorbike is when you're going really fast, like beyond the visor, and you're going down like fast, and then you just sit up suddenly. That's it, you're gone. Because that sudden wind, when it catches you, will just blow you right off the motorbike. So this kind of stuff I can completely relate to. Pay attention to the structure of the bug's wings, okay? Little cones sticking out everywhere, but this is what I love. This image blew my mind when I saw that, and I'm coming back to that later. Just remember that image, bug's wings structure. So, vortex energy, toroidal energy, torsion fields, this is all the same terminology, okay? So don't get confused by people that are trying to sound intelligent and very smart when they start talking about torsion fields and vortex. It's all the same stuff. And we know very well now that that torsion fields and vortex fields create anti-gravity or levitation effects. This goes back to the 20s already. Russian scientists have been doing this for a long time. Basically, what we're looking at when you look at torsion fields, toroidal fields, you're looking at the answer for everything. Okay, and I'm going to come back to this at the end. That elusive unifying theory for everything that Einstein and all these guys have been looking at. It's been staring them in the face. It's right in front of us. They're just too blind to see it. Answers to all the questions. And the yin-yang, people use the yin-yang sign all the time. Yin-yang is just a 2D representation of a torus. You take the torus and you just bring the two holes next to each other. This one is moving this way, this one is moving that way. You bring them around and you got the yin-yang sign. And this is why the yin-yang sign is such a powerful symbol. It's just a simplified version, a 2D version of a torus field. And that brings us to a very important discovery that so many researchers and conspiracy theorists have been grappling with. And that is the secret of 3, 6, and 9, Nikola Tesla. If you only knew the magnificence of 3, 6, and 9, you would know the key to the universe. Well, I've just given you the key to the universe, the torsion fields, the toroidal fields, vortex fields. That is, everything in our nature, in our reality, manifests in toroidal fields. So, what do we know about toroidal fields? Well, we know toroidal maths, or vortex maths. This has been exploded in the last 10 or 15 years. I can't remember exactly where vortex maths first came out, but this is very simple. 3, 6, and 9 are the fundamental numbers of vortex maths. Just go online. It's very simple. It's like everything else. It is so simple, it boggles the mind. It looks really complicated when you first look at it, but when you actually start to dissect it, you go, oh my God, this is so simple. How come nobody taught me this at school? And that's when it gets exciting. And you go, this is it, 3, 6, 9, vortex maths, torsion fields, toroidal maths. Now we get it. But it gets even more interesting than this. Look at the shape of the 9, 6, and 3, and the shape of the what is often shown as the vortex maths. Can you see that this is what it's often shown? Can you start seeing a very important symbol in there? Bingo! The Freemason symbol has got nothing to do with a set square and a compass. That's the deception. Yes, they were building stuff, but they weren't lifting up 100-ton blocks of granite with a set square and a compass. They clearly had some other advanced knowledge and technology that they encoded into their logo, because they were levitating stuff and building incredible cathedrals that we don't know how to build today, evidently with some ease that we can't do that easily today. We don't have cranes that can pick up a 100-ton block. They can pick it up, but it can't reach out very far. It can only pick it up like a few meters away from the crane and move it. But I think the heaviest thing we can pick up today is maybe like 100 tons. I don't know. You can do your own research, but it's not a lot. Some of those, these things are 300 tons, 500 tons, 1,000 tons. It's ridiculous. Our cranes today can't do that. So levitation technology, I think that's what it is. If you look at this 369, you take the G, you flip it, it becomes a 9. Right? This is a G. Sometimes the G actually looks like that, so it looks like a 9, becomes a 9, and that up there, if you flip it, it's a C, the all-seeing eye, C, the key of C, the note, the frequency of C. All encoded with sound, resonance, and how they were levitating stuff. And I believe that that's what the secret mystery of the Freemason symbol is. Going back to the Knights Templar and their ability to build temples. Taurus stones emit powerful energies and sound frequencies. We know this because we've measured it. A German scientist told me that some of these Taurus stones in my museum emit up to 3,400 decibels. Very high frequencies, we can't hear it, but we can feel it. This is why some people feel sick and they really get badly affected by the Taurus stones. And by now, I mentioned already that toroidal fields are actually scalar effects. Scalar is the latest, most sort of buzzword in mainstream science, leading edge science. And scalar energy happens instantly. There's no delay, because it goes into what's known as the center, the 0 point, or the vortex, the 0 point, or the vacuum, as Nassim Haramein calls it. It's like Russian dolls within each other. One Taurus stone, one Taurus, next Taurus, next Taurus, and that happens all instantaneously. It sucks in ambient noise and goes into the vortex, into the 0 point, and amplifies it, and it happens all simultaneously, because I'll go into some detail later. Spiraling bubbles. We put this Taurus stone into a bucket of water, and the next morning thousands of tiny bubbles are spiraling around. It's just unbelievable. I've tried to do it again. I've not been able to do it again. But once is good enough for me. Then Nassim, I know some of you may know the story. This is a Taurus stone that I took to him in 2015, and that Taurus stone crashed the TSA system at Doha International Airport. They pulled me off the plane and made me open my bag with 5 guys with guns. It was a very unnerving experience, but what it did prove is that this is very advanced technology. So when they were scanning the bag, they must have sent some frequencies right into it, and one of those must have hit gone right into the center of that stone, just at the right angle or whatever, and must have just sent out the scalar, the scalar effect that just went boof. And the captain actually told us this on the plane. So it didn't come, I didn't imagine it. The captain came out of the cockpit and said, whatever is in that bag crashed the TSA security system. So I don't think captain was making this up to try and impress us. Very quickly, show you how these torus stones actually work. We'll talk about toroidal fields and the balanced toroidal fields, right? The torus stones it's an imbalanced toroidal field. It actually sucks energy one way and pushes it out another way. And this is really important to understand. Another example, how the torus stones emit electromagnetic fields and powerful magnetic fields. Here is another torus stone that maxes out our measuring device in microtesla. Thank you. And now we demonstrate how the torus stones do push energy two ways. They push energy and they suck energy. And this is a very important discovery. This particular torus stone, in the way that it's lying, sucks energy. You can see the needle going in the opposite direction, into the negative, as opposed to spiking and increasing. If you remove it, Chris, and let's see how the needle rises again. Just move right away from it to show. There you go. So that's the normal reading in the room. And let's go back. So this is quite a new discovery.
Beautiful.
And
torus stones.
And here's some photographs with heat-sensitive camera. It shows you how it pushes energy the one way and sucks energy the other way. See on the left, 45 degrees in the center. Okay, so it's pushing energy. Here, 25 degrees in the center. Just turn it around. So it all depends how you hold it, whether it's giving you energy or whether it's sucking energy from you. So we're starting to get to understand how simple this technology is and how powerful it is that it can crash a TSA security system. Here's a friend of ours in Germany, Thomas, just holding the torus stone, and within a few seconds, look at his thyroid, look at his neck, how red it gets. Because thyroid controls your temperature in your body, right? So look how quickly it affects his thyroid. Within a few seconds. Just simple measurement like that. So these things have a very powerful effect. Sometimes when people walk into the museum, they literally they walk into my museum, because I've got about 20 torus stones there now, and they literally just go, whoa, there's too much energy in here. They don't know why, but they can feel it. And just to show you the inextricable connectedness between cones and toruses, it's just, these are things that I picked up, right? And when you look at diagrams of how cones and toruses are inextricably connected in how they show it, this is it. The cone and the torus, you can't separate them. You need a cone to really use it. So cone-shaped tools and toruses can be used to either push energy in or suck energy out. And this is why this is such an important discovery for us to really get us a deeper understanding of how this ancient technology worked. And it's only really recently, in 2009, that SASER technology was first released. Scientists developed SASER, an acoustic laser that produces terahertz sound waves. This is the first time. And obviously the biggest interest is in the military. So I believe that these cones are actually the tips of SASER beams and SASER devices, very powerful. And we have these in our eyes. All right, biomimicry. Look at this. We have rods and cones in our eyes. The cones are at the back of our eyes. They are in the retina. The iris is like a torus. The light comes through the iris. It hits the retina, which is like a satellite dish, with the cones in the back facing backwards. So the light comes through the retina, gets amplified, and hits the cones in the back of our eyes, and the light and the sound gets sped up goes into the optic nerve and goes where? Goes to your pineal gland. Like the master gland organ that we have in our body that's been destroyed by the elite through fluoride and all the other crap that they feed us. So we should all be able to do this with our eyes. But we can't, because we've been destroyed. Our DNA has been destroyed. Our pineal gland has been destroyed. We don't have ESP. All of this because we've been manipulated by these beings from not being able to use our full bodies. What blows my mind is talking about cones and technology. This is 2017. Hendrik Holter won the Saab Award for developing this antenna, the most powerful antenna ever developed. It's called the phase ray antenna, and it's just a bunch of cones on a plate. And this antenna both sends and receives information. Well, now you know why. Very, very simple. But what blows my mind, okay, is the similarity between this image of this award-winning antenna and the image of what the bug's wings look like. You know, I've got to just love this, you know. You've got to be kidding me. Okay, let's look at our bodies and how brilliant and incredible our bodies and the nature and insects really are. So, now we start getting to some really interesting shit. I've been really going through all that stuff just to get to this point right now. So hopefully this will wake you up a little bit if you're starting to lose me there. How much do we think we really know? Let's answer these questions. The government is not your friend. The government is not your servant. The government serves the bankers and the elite. We should know that by now. Anyone has a problem with that? Please put up your hand or leave now. Okay, if you don't know this yet, welcome to your awakening. Okay. So, is the government keeping secrets from us? Is the government lying to us? Are the secret agencies lying to us? Are the pharmaceutical companies lying to us? Are they keeping secrets from us? Are the oil companies telling us the truth, or are they lying to us? Yes, of course. When I found this diagram recently, it literally sent shivers down my spine. I didn't realize how powerful Standard Oil was and is today under whatever name it's hidden. They pretty much own everything in the oil industry, including BP. It's ridiculous. Anyway, let's carry on. Is the media telling us the truth? All right? No. So you can see the humor in this, right? It's funny, but it's actually also very serious. Because if people don't know this, then they live in this perpetual state of confusion. Why is the world so bad? Right? Well, we know why the world is bad because everyone is freaking lying to us about everything. And these guys in power that have been kept there by the puppet masters and the money and the bankers are there for a reason, because they were put there by the bankers, because they are the puppets that march to the drum of the bankers, that do what they want. So, now that we've established, and it sounded to me like you've all had a little fun there, because it is funny in a way, that we're getting very little truth from these major agencies. So, why would anybody think for 1 second that NASA is telling us the truth? Okay, put this into context, people. Go back, think about oil, media, pharmaceuticals. They're lying to us about everything. Why would NASA, the most expensive government department, or whoever that department belongs to, why would they possibly be telling us the truth? So, from that perspective, I'd like us to revisit what we think we know about space, the cosmos, our planet, our solar system, everything we've ever been told by NASA and the space agencies and those that fund the space agencies. I'd like to suggest that once again, everything we've been told is a lie. However, to tell a lie, you need to hold and maintain a golden thread of truth. Otherwise, the lie falls apart. So in every lie that we get from the government or from any of these agencies, pharmaceutical, all of these guys, there's always a golden thread of truth that they stick to. Otherwise, the whole thing will just implode. And this is the beautiful thing, that once we find the golden thread of truth, we can start seeing how they're manipulating and lying and how they're spinning the lies around that golden thread. And that's when, for me, it gets really exciting. What I find interesting is that the bigger the lie, the more likely we are to believe it. Because we can't imagine that the government could tell such a big lie. Or that, because people just automatically think that this is too big a lie. There'd be too many people that have to be in on it. And we would be wrong. Like everything else, only a few people need to know the truth and what's really going on. And the rest of the people below them in the pyramid, it's all compartmentalized information. You only know what you get paid for. The guys at NASA that work the computers for the rocket launches and that, they only know about this little thing, how much oxygen should be in the fuel tank. And that's what and if it goes above that or beyond that, then that's their speciality. The guys that build the rockets, or build a component for the rocket, or the casing for the rockets, that's what they know. They're knowing that they're building a rocket. They don't know what happens to that rocket. They don't know where it's connected to. They just know what they do. Right? They don't know how everything works. The guys that launch these rockets, they don't know where the rockets go. They just know they go up. And then they monitor them. And everybody has their little compartmentalized job. The one thing you'll note, please go and do this for yourself. No rocket that's ever been launched goes up. Okay? They don't go up. And quite frankly, okay, what is the shortest, or what would any of us assume is the shortest route from here to space? If I put a rocket here, where should that rocket go? Should it go that direction or that direction? Where should it go? It should go up, and not up for a few seconds and then start going that way. It should go up forever and not stop going up. Well, that is not the case. Throughout the history of rocket launches, and if you don't know this, please go and do this research for yourselves. Something very strange is going on here. And this goes back to that NASA has been lying to us pretty much about everything. So the problems with science are interesting. It literally is just one giant mess. From the Big Bang Theory, which actually equals creation. The moment you say the Big Bang Theory, it means something was created out of a moment. That means some form of consciousness or creator or God was behind the creation. So when scientists talk about Big Bang, they're actually admitting that the universe and everything in it was created, but they don't go that far. Light speed is used as the barrier, right? Light speed is not a barrier to anything. Light speed is just a measurement of light through a medium. Depending on what that medium is, we find the speed at which light moves through that medium. Now what we know is that the denser the medium, the slower the speed of light. The thinner the medium, the faster the speed of light. In fact, we find that light actually has no speed, because light is just a measurement of an electromagnetic phenomenon that goes through a medium, and we can only see the light if there's a medium for us to see the light through. Otherwise, light is invisible. These are some basic fundamental things that we don't get taught. Right? The standard model of physics is a huge problem. This is where the mess actually begins. The standard model of physics describes what we understand about the universe and things in it in Newtonian terms, except gravity. So they create a whole model for physics and the universe, but they exclude the most fundamental law on Earth, gravity, out of that model. Because we don't understand gravity, we can't explain it. So there's a big problem. So gravity remains unexplained. And then the fundamental forces, electromagnetic, weak force, strong force, and gravity remain unexplained. People think, because we study it and they teach it at school, at university, and they give it names and they define it, we think that they understand it, or we understand it, because we can also do mathematical formulas, which is modern black magic. You can do anything with a mathematical formula. And we think we understand these things, but we don't. The fundamental thing about the nucleus and the thing they call the strong force, they had to come up with a name because the nucleus in basic physics cannot exist. The amount of energy that it will take to squeeze the protons and the neutrons into a little tiny place thing called the nucleus is unimaginable. In fact, I think there are some mathematical formulas that have been shown that there is not enough energy in the entire universe to squeeze one nucleus of an atom together. So we have a problem here, Houston. Serious problem. But because we give it a name, it's called the strong force. The forces that hold the nucleus together. People just assume that we know what it is. No, we have no freaking idea what's going on. So this is the problem with our science today. And we just accept it because people just don't know enough, and we don't do enough research, or we don't inform ourselves. We just buy the BS that we get sold all the time. You know, Middle State Tennessee University in 2005, a bunch of undergraduates and some high school kids propelled sound faster than the speed of light. This was published in the American Institute of Physics, and this should have made headline news across all the media, everything, because you can please understand that the speed of light is the fundamental. That's where our science and physics begins and ends. Nothing can move beyond the speed of light. How many times have you heard that? Over and over and over again. Well, that's the BS. So suddenly, if some bunch of kids can propel sound beyond the speed of light, this is not good news for modern science and physics, and especially the standard model that's shoved down our throats. So, big problem. We cannot create or destroy energy. This is what we get told. And then we get told that the Big Bang is how the world and how the universe began. Energy was just suddenly created out of nothing. But I just thought you said we can't create energy. Well, it wasn't created. It was already there in an infinitesimally small point called the singularity. So they keep getting away with BS like that. They make stuff up to just justify some theory. And it's a Big Bang theory. You forget that the word theory is actually in there. Right? Big Bang theory. Oh, but it just conveniently dropped the word theory, and everybody now believes that that's we're told. So we're told that that's how everything began. Here's Martin Rees, you know, royal astronomer, probably the most decorated astronomer in England. This is 2015, where he talks about the long path to understanding gravity. It's like, okay, we've been wondering about gravity for so long, we have no idea what's going on. And now we get to quantum mechanics. And this is a huge problem. Everything we believe to be true about nature of reality around us changes at the subatomic level. It destroys all rational thoughts about Newtonian physics or the nature of reality as perceived in the visible world. So we have two laws, two sets of laws. We have laws for the world around us that we see, Newtonian physics, and we have a different set of laws that are nonsensical and magical at the subatomic level. How do you reconcile this thing? This is simply impossible. Surely the invisible stuff becomes the visible stuff, and it's the same set of laws that should govern everything. That's how I understand it. And you realize that what we've been discussing here, and the toroidal fields, the vortex fields, and everything that we've shared so far is the fundamental law that governs everything. And the separation of the laws and the standard model and the misunderstanding of gravity is because they start from the wrong point of departure. Like I said, light, every light frequency has a sound. Every sound frequency has a light. They're inextricable. Sound is a toroidal field. Sound is a scalar energy. It moves infinitely fast. Scalar is toroidal. It's instantaneous, just like gravity. This is one amazing thing. Gravity happens instantly. There's not a delayed effect with gravity. It's an instantaneous thing. And therefore, we can make some really simple conclusions. Simple conclusions because these are simple things if you approach them from a simple perspective. And this girl figured it out already. If light is an electromagnetic phenomenon, and if gravity bends light, then surely gravity must be an electromagnetic phenomenon as well. You can't have one thing that is not related to something else affecting this thing, right? So, wow, this should be grade 1 stuff. Light is electromagnetic, this is pretty standard stuff. Light bends gravity, or gravity bends light, therefore gravity must be electromagnetic. Wow. So if gravity is electromagnetic, that takes us to the next level. If gravity acts instantly, then gravity must be a toroidal or a scalar effect. And therefore gravity is electromagnetic, is a toroidal or scalar effect. I think we just figured out what gravity is and how it works. Like everything else. It's a torsion field, it's a vortex field. It's a toroidal energy, scalar energy. It's that simple. And now we can figure out how sound can travel faster than the speed of light. And now this has been the best kept secret, and they don't want to let this out because sound is the source of light. You can't have light without sound. You can have sound that is invisible, but you can't have light without a sound frequency. It's not going to work. So when sound goes into the vortex, into the toroidal field, it spins in and it goes into what is referred to as the 0 point, or the vacuum. And that 0 point is known as the infinite density of the vacuum, where everything becomes infinitely dense. And everything else in creation is just a less dense form of that infinite density of the morphogenetic field or of creation. So we talk about this density. It's this density is very sparse. Like we told that our atoms, there's nothing in, when you go into the atoms, there's nothing there, just air, or just space. So if you go into the infinite density, it means that it's infinitely dense. And Nassim Haramein has actually shown and written the formulas and the papers that prove the infinite density of the vacuum. It's fantastic. He's given us some very important food for thought, or very important scientific support for understanding how sound is the primary tool of creation and how sound travels instantly. So let's just do a bit of logic here. If light is put through a medium, the denser the medium, the slower the speed of light, right? Sound is the opposite. If you put sound into a medium, the denser the medium, the faster the speed of sound. This is why sound travels faster underwater, because water is a lot denser than the air. So, simple question. How fast does sound travel in an infinitely dense medium? Infinitely fast. Boom. And how dense is the vacuum or the 0 point at the center of the torsion field or the vortex field or the torus? Infinitely dense. So the torus stones and the toroidal fields suck in the ambient sound and bring it into the 0 point at which it enters the infinite density, and it affects everything everywhere. It creates the next torus around it, like the Russian doll, but it happens instantaneously. This is why when I say, and this is scalar energy, so you've got these scalar waves, if you want to call them, but they happen instantaneously, and they just vibrate like this instantly, carrying all the information instantaneously at the same time. So every thought you have, every word you speak, every move you make goes into the center of every cell in your body, into the toroidal field around your cell. It goes into that infinite density of the vacuum of the cell in the little toruses around the cells, or the sound frequencies that you make with your voice goes into the center and is available to everyone in all of creation, everywhere. This is why every thought you have can be read and heard by people across galaxies, across all of creation. And this is how some people that wake up can connect with others and can connect telepathically across time and space. Interesting thing, when I first met Creator Mutwa, and I asked him, what are these torus stones used for? He said to me, they were used to communicate with people in other galaxies. I went, oh, geez, okay, you lost your mind, you know? And then he added to that, he said, actually, sometimes the women used to put their urine inside the torus stone, and they would be able to connect even better with people in other parts of the universe. And I said, okay, now you've lost it, dude. And it's just a deeper understanding of frequency and the resonance. You know, your urine has a certain resonance. And maybe you connect with your other self somewhere, who knows. But this is really interesting stuff. The fact that he knew that the toruses were used as communication devices just shows you how deep this ancient oral knowledge goes. This knowledge has been passed down for thousands and thousands of years, and the ancient people knew this. If you tell that to a scientist, I bet you take a challenge you. Go to any of the smartest professor at your local university and ask them how these Torah stones can be used to communicate with people. They will have no idea. They don't know because they don't teach that. Maybe some of them do. Maybe some of them do. So, very quickly, now we get to the very interesting part of this, and that is space and cosmos. Now, we've already determined that NASA has been lying to us, that things are not the way they are, and when you go to like Contact at the Desert and in the desert and all these people talk about the secret space program, the emphasis is in the wrong place. The comma is in the wrong place. It's not the secret space program. It's the secret space program. Space is a secret. We don't know what space is. So just shift the comma, put the emphasis in the wrong place, in the different place, and suddenly you become illuminated. This is what I think we are stumbling upon here. Once we start reading between the lines. What is space? First of all, important thing is that water is everywhere in space. This is information that is not generally known by people until you go looking for it. For the last 30 years, NASA has been telling us about water in space everywhere. Ocean worlds, water in the solar system and beyond. I thought that there was water. It was very hard to find, and without water there can be no life. Well, it seems to me that there's life everywhere because there's bloody water everywhere. His solar systems beyond is awash with water. These are all NASA statements. ESA, European Space Agency, it doesn't stop. NASA astronomers have detected sprawling cloud of cold water vapor around a burgeoning solar system of a nearby star. The water vapor could eventually deliver oceans to dry planets that are forming in the system. Wow, suddenly there's water? Eye of God Nebula is weeping tears. A nebula is a place where stars and galaxies are born. How big is a tear that comes out of a nebula? Right? Just start putting this into context. This is really interesting stuff. You know, oceans inside Saturn's moon. Star found shooting water bullets. A star shooting a water bullet. What is a star? Our sun is a star. Are they telling us that there's water on the stars? NASA confirms best ever evidence for water on Mars. Water from Orion. The system of Orion spewing out water. In 2011, astronomers found there's water floating in space. Water is just floating in space everywhere. This cosmic water trail discovered by the Herschel Space Observatory. Water everywhere, no matter where you go in space. Water on an asteroid. Once again, star found shooting water bullets. I love that one. This is like, you know, and people read this and they don't really think about what they are reading. And then stellar sprinkler nourishes galactic garden. Wow, this is lovely. There's a sprinkler out in the cosmos. And it's just watering the galactic garden. Think about what they're telling us. Here, all stars have water. They studied 30 stars and their conclusion was that all stars have water. What is a star? Our sun is a star. What? Is there water on stars? Yes, there is. There's water on the sun. We've known this for decades, that there's water on the sun. And they tell you that, but it's not water in like water, it's water vapor. So, well, it's the same bloody thing. It's just ridiculous. You know, water on the sun, molecules everywhere. Molecules of water on the sun everywhere. And this is how one NASA scientist tries to sort of fudge the subject. He says, as strange as it may seem, yes, water has been detected on the sun. Actually, what was detected is steam over a particular region of the cool sunspot where the temperature were only about 1,000 Kelvin or so. Wow, okay, I'm okay with that, you know. Okay. Oh, so it's not on the sun, it's on the cool parts of the sun. Okay, that's all right. I'm okay with that. Yeah. This stuff is stand-up comedy material, really. It really is, you know. You can take this to town. Waterloo University, you know, confirms that water exists on the sun. At least they're properly authorized because they're Waterloo University. But I'll tell you what, this next one is the one that really makes me think. And again, it connects to biblical information. This is a recent discovery again. Earth's water is older than the sun. Another article in Discovery Science magazine. Earth's water older than the sun. Think of that sequence in the first paragraph of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Heavens and the earth. Heavens and earth. And only then God's Spirit moved across the waters. So there was heaven and earth and the waters. And only then God created the sun, the light. Then God said, let there be light. So it tells us that the waters, the earth, the water on earth was created before the sun was created. So yes, the water of the earth would be older than the water on the sun. I know it's freaky, but do with that information what you want, really. Here's an interesting picture. The one on the left is known as the millennial run or something like that, where they focus the telescopes into the darkest part of the universe, and that's what they find. And this is a picture of our swimming pool. And you start seeing that space and water are probably the same thing. Our solar system is surrounded by water and ice. It's the Kuiper Belt in a disk around our solar system. And then around the entire solar system and all the planets in a disk is a thing called the Oort cloud, which is just more water around the entire solar system. So our entire solar system is just in a large ball of water. They tell us it's ice, but I no longer believe them. They're just too scared to say it's water. So they say it's ice. Probably looks something like this. That's our solar system. And suddenly the Bible makes sense. The Spirit of God moved over the waters, and God said, let there be light. Where did the water come from? What is the water? And this is what we find in modern science. It's called sonoluminescence, putting sound through water. Suddenly you get this beautiful bright light in a bubble. So is it possible that water is the stuff of the universe, and that water is sacred because of that? I believe that we're now looking in the right direction. H2O, that's water. Hydrogen and oxygen, two of the most important building blocks on Earth and in space. Hydrogen, the most abundant element in space, apparently, and oxygen, the most abundant element on Earth, in the soil, in plants, in chemistry, in everything, and most likely in our atmosphere as well. They say it's the second most abundant, but I think it's probably not true. So oxygen and hydrogen. Now we got the building blocks of everything. Water. And then you add silica to it, which is what they're finding in the protoplanet creation. They're finding water and silica. Oh my God, we got them. You got quartz and water that make up everything. It's just getting more and more beautiful. And suddenly, this thing of vacuum, space is a vacuum, is just a myth. It's not a scientific fact. You cannot reconcile space with a vacuum. Anyone who knows anything about physics will know that to think of space as a vacuum is just simply not possible. Physics will not allow space to be a vacuum. It's just not possible. Because there are basic things that you can't do in a vacuum. Sound can't travel. No explosions, no fire, no propulsion, jet engines. You can't propel a jet engine, or all the sci-fi movies that we see. This is why Hollywood promotes science fiction movies, because they fill our heads with lies. We believe that you can fly jet planes through space, through a vacuum. You can't do that. So what is a vacuum? What is out there? Well, a vacuum, if space is a vacuum, then Einstein's EMC square can't be true either. Because that's based on energy equals mass times the speed of light square. And if there's nothing in space, then you can't have mass. There's no mass and there's no weight. So it's energy equals 0 for mass times the speed of light. So it's 0. So there's 0 energy. And that's not possible. We know that space is full of energy. or we believe there is. And then we get the lies of NASA. What's the time, by the way? We're really running late. What is the time? 9:40. 9:40? Ooh. All right. If you haven't seen Jay Weidner's Kubrick Odyssey, I recommend you watch it, because after that you will never believe that the moon landings actually happened. Right. First of all, we don't know what the moon is. It's the only celestial body in the sky that doesn't spin. We have many references in ancient times where the world were about the world before the moon appeared. Over and over we find ancient civilizations, especially the Greeks, that talk about a world without the moon. And they actually have a name for the people. Like the Arcadians appeared before the moon. And a moonless earth. And no moon in the sky from the Indians in Colombia. And Aristotle spoke about the Arcadians in Greece before being inhabited by the Hellenes, had a population of Pelasgians who occupied the land already before there was a moon in the sky above the earth. And for this reason they were called the Proselines, before the moon. I'm not going to go on this, just go online and watch, because I need to speed up here. Go watch this thing called the lunar wave. All right, it is this wave that goes. Let's just show it quickly. Otherwise, you're not going to go look at it. So it's first filmed in 2012. It's been filmed many times since. And this just tells us that we don't really know what the moon is. Could just be a hologram.
All right, welcome to the Crow Discovery Project. Again, this is the 2012 lunar wave footage, the best example of the lunar wave that we have, and I'm going to show you some things that sharp-eyed followers have spotted long ago and that I have talked about, but I have never taken the time to carefully illustrate.
You see the wave going up there?
What I'm going to show you here means an awful lot, but I'm also going to show the pulses that happen in the lower left limb of the moon. So watch the lower left there, and I'm just going to run a straight slowed down view, 30%. If you've got sharp eyes, you'll see what we detected on a 60-inch monitor. Now look inside the circle. There's a pulse that goes from lower left to upper right, and in the next circle, the yellow one, there's a lateral sweep that goes from left to right straight across the screen, and this is all going on as the wave is starting at the bottom. So now look at the pulses backwards and forwards. That's backwards, this is forwards, coming from the lower left limb of the moon. You can see the pulses now that I've put filters on them, how they have a curved aspect to them, and if you've got sharp eyes, you'll see the sweep up above. Now what I'm going to show you now, we have talked about, and many sharp-eyed viewers have known that this was an important thing about this clip for a long time. Here comes the wave. Look at the dark underlined crater in the center of your screen. Watch how it's displaced, almost like you're looking through water. There goes the wave backwards, forwards, the wave hits the crater, displaces. This wave is displacing, as if you were looking through water, the entire image of the moon. Now I've never taken...
You can go watch it and research this for yourself. It really is ridiculous. I believe that the moon is part of the deception to make us believe what other planets look like and what things in space look like, which is part of the deception. The fact that the moon and the sun are exactly the same size in the sky, if you just think about the statistical probability in an infinite universe of celestial bodies that this is the case, the statistical probability that that is an accident is simply impossible. This had to have happened on purpose and was structured. Here's a young NASA astronaut that recently was talking about the Orion rockets, the most advanced rockets that are now being sent into deep space, and now they have to move through the dangerous Van Allen belts, these very powerful radiation fields. It's like a giant microwave, millions of times more powerful than any microwave we have. And they have to go through the radiation belts. We thought we did this in 1969 when we sent the guys to the moon. They went through a microwave in the sky to the moon and back, and they did this like 6 times. What happened? How come we went to the moon and nobody got fried? And when you ask the astronauts, and I'm not kidding you, go and do this research, when they ask the astronauts, how did you get through the Van Allen belts? The answer is, they hadn't been discovered yet. This is it. That's what they say. So this poor guy is now showing us how they're going to have to fly the rockets and how they've made them very strong to resist, withstand these Van Allen radiation things. So now too many people are waking up and realizing that this is a big problem, that we could not have sent people to the moon if these Van Allen radiation belts are real. And so guess what NASA does next? They had to devise a new lie that would circumnavigate this problem. And a few months ago, they released this incredible statement about a new discovery about space, the Earth. And they concluded, they tell us now, staggering discovery reveals that moon lies inside Earth's atmosphere. Yes, this is from February 2019. That's how recent this is. When you start reading this kind of BS, you realize the guys are getting really desperate. Like, there's one lie on top of another. Now suddenly the moon lies within the Earth's atmosphere? Wow, dudes, this is fantastic. Now we really know this is better than Disney. Now they tell us that it is... The Earth's atmosphere is much bigger than previously thought, extending far beyond the moon. Wow. And they've known this for about 20 years. We now know that the atmosphere surrounding our planet stretches about 630,000 kilometers. We now know. Just enough to fit the moon in. So we don't have to go through the Van Allen belts. And now it's okay. We could have sent the guys to the moon, and the Van Allen belts are no longer a threat. Thank God for the Earth's atmosphere. And we were just so silly. We didn't know this, only discovered it now. So now you start realizing that everything to do with the Mars landing is all BS. It's all a hoax. Everything we've ever seen from Mars was probably shot from in the Canadian Arctic on Devon Island. All the images you've seen, go and look at this for yourself. It's ridiculous. Nothing that we've seen comes from Mars. Everything comes from Devon Island, northern Canada. And if water is in space, or space is water, where does this watery space begin? Where's the edge? And once again, the Bible comes to the rescue. And God placed a firmament in the sky to separate the waters of the heavens from the waters below, and to bring the flood. What did God do? He opened the gates of heaven, and the waters poured down. If you read oral testimony of what the flood was, it wasn't rain. It was huge waterfalls falling out of the sky, not rain. Right? I'm going to speed up here. Modern science tells us we live in an electromagnetic universe. Everything spins and vibrates, except the moon, obviously. Sound and resonance. Sound and resonance are the common links of all creation stories. These are just 4 of them. Christianity, the Word, Hinduism, Egyptians sang the world into creation. Aboriginal people in Australia talk about 3 sacred songs that brought everything into creation. Sound is the breath of the Creator. It's the prime resonance frequency and the code for creation. Sound. I'm not going to go through this because we're not really just running very late here. Look up Simoscope, John Stuart Reid. You'll see that our voices are infinite tools of creation. We can create and manifest anything with our voices, and it's 3D. Toroidal fields coming out of our voices as we speak. Okay, we should be able to manifest and create everything, and it's that's been destroyed. Sound and the magnetron, magnetism is inextricably connected. Sound creates magnetic fields. Moving magnetic fields create electricity. And therefore we live in a magneto-electric universe, not an electromagnetic universe. It's a subtle difference, but a big deception. Here's some new information, 2015, right? Here, magnetism control heat and sound. This is new information. These guys are boggled by this, that heat and sound can be controlled with magnets and magnetism. Look at this. This is sound. So, yet yet before now, nobody ever imagined that sound waves might also have magnetic properties. They boggled about this in 2015. That sound waves have magnetic properties. Wow. But surely you should know that that's how it works. Every speaker in your car and your hi-fi system works on this principle. Sound and magnets are inextricably connected. Yeah, it works both ways. Sound creates magnetic fields and magnetic fields create sound. It's just insane. Ancient civilizations knew this. They understood this very clearly, and they used sound and frequency as a source of energy. Sound and frequency is used to control and manipulate humanity, taking control of humans through cone-shaped tools, removing our ESP, controlling our pineal gland, the primary little organ, what do you call it, in our body, right? Removing it so that if you have ESP, you don't need to speak. I can hear your mind, I can hear you think, I can feel your pain. So if we're connected with ESP, it's more than just we able to communicate. I can't hurt you, because if I'm hurting you, I feel your pain, because it's a frequency. So no one can hurt anybody else. No one can lie, no one can cheat, no one can hurt anyone, because then everybody feels the pain. It's a collective consciousness. This is why they went to such extreme trouble to destroy our pineal gland and our capacity to communicate, and use the pineal gland as this ESP master organ. It's unbelievable. Controlling our pineal gland and the DNA, tree of life. This is what these guys were doing. Whoever these guys were, most likely the Anunnaki or some other beings. And by now, you would have seen that the all-seeing eye of Horus is most likely that central part of our brain that controls the pineal gland and all the other important parts in the center of our brain. And look at this guy's watch. Once again, we come to the pine cone, the cone-shaped tool, the magnetron watch, and this cone that goes into the magnetron. It's just amazing. Remember Egypt, cones and magnets? Same thing. And nothing has changed. Today they control our minds, control us through media, television, radio, Wi-Fi. Everything is magnetic. Everything is sound and magnetism. Magnetic fields create torus shapes, and you see this beautifully. This is what a perfectly balanced toroidal magnetic field looks like. Perfectly balanced from the top and from below. It spins one way from the top and the same way from the bottom. It's not positive and negative. We've misinterpreted it as positive and negative. It's the same spin in opposite directions that create that perfect balance. And what happens at the center, this line here, is known as the accretion disk. That's where the energies meet, and they move in opposite directions, creating the energy. Most likely the friction that is part of creating the energy of the magnetic field, a perfectly balanced magnetic field. There you can see a balanced, complete magnetic torus with its accretion disk at the center. Emits energy as matter in a disk. This is really important, because when we're studying solar systems and the galaxy, we see solar disks. And we see the study of solar disks are very well defined. It goes on and on and on, and how solar disks are formed. The most detailed image ever of a young star in its protoplanetary disk. We read this all over the place. And now they're talking about silica and water in protoplanetary disks that are moving in opposite directions, creating spin in opposite directions. This is fantastic, people. Unbelievable. Galactic toruses. Solar systems are toruses. Galaxies are toruses. We read about galactic disks. Thousands of images of galactic disks floating around in space. Here's an accretion disk of a so-called galaxy or black hole that they just recently found. Dynamics of galactic disks. This is what when you start studying this stuff, that's all about toruses and the galactic disks, the accretion disks. And we are told that the Earth's energy, the magnetic fields are created by the molten core, some molten iron at the center of the core. That's another lie, because it seems that the sound of the Earth actually creates the magnetic field. It's the sound of the Earth. We know that the Earth rings like a bell, never stops. It's not the molten core. That's just a lie. But this is a bit of a problem, because with the Earth's magnetic model, we seem to have a half a magnet floating around in space. You've seen from the galactic disk, the solar disks, and so forth. All of them are perfectly balanced toroidal fields. So how can the Earth be an exception to the rule here? Right? I have a big problem with this. We've already seen how everything manifests in toroidal fields, from subatomic particles to sound to light, everything. We've seen solar systems as toroidal fields. We see galaxies as toroidal fields. How can the Earth be the exception to the rule? And I smell a rat here. And this is why I think NASA is part of the big lie and deception. When we look at magnetic toruses visible under a ferrocell lens, we see the beautiful lines of magnetic fields. Suddenly they become visible. And when you bring a magnetic effect, when you bring a magnet into a ferrofluid, you see these little cones that just come up out of everywhere. And you see the effect of nature, sound and magnetism on nature. And then speaker magnets under ferrocell lens, what do you see? Tiny little cones facing the center. What does that remind you of? Of that dude's wristwatch. And we start seeing a very important connection here of sound, magnets, and the technology that these guys used. It's all about free energy, magnets and sound. Gravity can finally be explained, and it's actually been explained a long time ago. Coulomb's law is a well-known law in the field of electricity. It describes the electric motion and electric forces. Coulomb's law is identical to the law of gravity. It's unbelievable. And yet Coulomb's law describes an electric force. That means electricity means electromagnetism means sound. So we've just figured out what gravity is, but we've already figured it out a while ago, haven't we? It's a toroidal field. Gravity is an electromagnetic phenomenon. So it can be easily explained like this. Much easier explained like this. Sound creates magnetic fields, moving magnetic fields create electricity. Even the precessional wobble of the Earth, that we talk about, the precession of the equinoxes, is encoded in a toroidal to the precessional wobble of a torus field. Everything is in there. Magnets and toruses and leading research, these are fusion chambers. The most leading research programs on Earth today, where they're looking for fusion, the answer for fusion. And fusion is always 30 years away. It's a joke in the science industry, like they always joke. Fusion is just 30 years away. Look at this fusion reactor in the UK. It's just a giant torus. And what is at the heart of all these? Magnets. How does all this technology work? Always works with magnets. And this brings us to the last part of this evening and one of my new favorite subjects, the particle physics agenda. This is unbelievable. This is just so spectacular. They make us believe that the universe is filled with tiny subatomic particles bumping into each other randomly, creating everything in creation through random cosmic coincidences, including our consciousness, is created in this way. This is the particle physics agenda, to make us believe this, that everything is just a random accident of tiny particles bumping into each other. Well, we know by now that if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. So I'd like to suggest to you that thinking of particles are like movie frames, right? Frequency gives perception of reality. If you take a bunch of movies, if you take a movie and you stop it, one movie frame doesn't give us anything, but if you take a bunch of moving vibration, it's a frequency of the moving pictures that gives us an impression of life. It's the same thing with particles. Particles are just momentary manifestations of physical form that we believe is real, because it vibrates so quickly. It's the same. Same thing. Particles don't exist. It's just a frequency that manifests and gives us the impression of reality. And then they started the search for the God particle. This started in 1887 with looking for the ether that holds everything together. And the Michelson-Morley experiment became the most incredible experiment in all of scientific history. And yet this is not taught at school at all. They try to prove the existence of the ether that holds everything together. We know Plato and everyone, even Einstein and Tesla, all the scientists always spoke about the ether that holds everything together. They try to show how the earth moves through space, how earth moves through the ether, and therefore proving the existence of the ether. Well, they could not do that, could not find any evidence or proof that the Earth moved through space. And this is why there was no ether discovered, and the existence of the ether was thrown aside. And the ether is replaced by a particle physics universe. This was a huge problem because that created a paradox, because particles need a medium to move through. So now we got a big problem. And then literally 10 years later, after the Michelson-Morley experiment, this guy comes along, J.J. Thomson, and he wins a Nobel Prize for discovering a theoretical particle called the electron. A theoretical particle wins a Nobel Prize, the electron. Unbelievable. 10 years later, Rutherford comes along, and with a very basic study of these subatomic particles called electrons and other aspects of it, designs the first atomic model. And they find that the atom has a very dense nucleus because it deflected the particles and electrons and stuff that they shot at this, and not realizing that they're actually shooting it at the density of the toroidal field, that infinite density of the torus, right? So that with the magnetic field, of course, it will deflect the particles. They didn't figure that out. So, and yet the theoretical atom of the model, the theoretical atomic model remains today, and that brings the whole Heisenberg uncertainty principle that you never know where the electron is, we can't determine where the electron is, and so forth. It just becomes a mess. Max Planck comes along and he proposes the whole quantum leap, that electrons don't move gradually between the levels that they exist on, energy levels. They disappear on the one level and miraculously appear on another level. This is great. This is called the quantum leap, right? But this suggests teleportation or bilocation of matter. Today we'd call it magic. It's here, it disappears and reappears here. Today that kind of thinking is called magic. On the quantum field and quantum mechanics it's okay, but in the physical world it's not okay. Wow, we have two sets of rules for quantum mechanics and Newtonian physics. And yet Max Planck tells us that he regards consciousness as fundamental, that nothing can get behind consciousness, that everything is derivative, matter is derivative of consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything we talk about, everything we regard existing, postulate consciousness. So he was a smart guy. These guys, this was a famous 1927 Solvay conference in Brussels, and this is where they got used to get together and talk about all these things. And then the search for the God particle continues. And then by the 1960s, Peter Higgs comes along and he proposes the God particle for the first time, saying this is the thing that creates everything. This is behind everything in creation. And for that to exist, he proposes the Higgs field because it needs a medium to move through. So now they get very excited because if they can find the God particle, they can prove the existence of the Higgs field because the ether is gone. Remember, the ether doesn't exist. So they need to find something to replace the ether. So to do this, to find the God particle and prove the Higgs field, they build the Large Hadron Collider. This is where the real deception begins. The largest machine ever built, the Large Hadron Collider, most complex experimental facility ever built, 17 miles. They speed up these particles and crash them together to try and smash them and see if they can find subatomic particles. By 2013, they finally announce the God particle, and the whole world of science breathes a huge sigh of relief because finally they find the God particle and they have the Higgs field and a medium through which particles can now move. So particle physics is safe. Finally they can start proving all that stuff they've been peddling for so long. A medium for particles. And it looks like Homer Simpson may have discovered it 10 years before they found it at CERN. So the question is, what did they really find? What does a God particle look like? We think that they've captured a particle. It's in a box or a bottle, and they've got the particle. There it is. No, it doesn't. They don't have anything. They have a little spike on a computer. There's a blip, 1/1,000,000th of a second spike on a computer, and say, there it is. There's a God particle. We've got it. And an entire global theory and new science gets created around this thing, right? And that pretty much launches what has now become known as the quantum zoo. It is quite unbelievable. It is just, literally, the quantum zoo is a mess of unimaginable proportion. And it starts with atoms and baryons, bosons, fermions, gravitons, hadrons, Higgs bosons, leptons, mesons, quarks, other particles, quasi-particles, and an infinite number of particles that they keep making up to keep the lie going. It's all just a frequency. There are an infinite number of imaginary particles. Just choose a frequency and you can create your own particle, right? And then it's all about the spin. Then suddenly they realize that all particles have spin. And now suddenly it can't just have spin in one direction, it has to have an opposite. So suddenly you have particles going this way and the antiparticle going the other way. So now the quantum zoo becomes even more crazy, and you start getting named like, neutrino and neutral boson, chargino and photino and photons and wino and xeno and Higgsino as opposed to Higgs boson. And it is just ridiculous. It's like people are just literally on drugs here. They're taking drugs and they're hallucinating and they're making up shit, and people are swallowing it everywhere. It's unfreaking believable. And then they come up and then they realize that because of the spin, these particles all spin, because everything spins, everything spins, right? We know this. And it creates these perfectly balanced toroidal fields. One spins this way and the other one spins that way. So now they're discovering it because they're only maybe detecting this spin in this way, and they suddenly realize, oh, there's something going there as well. So now they're creating these, and they, instead of just calling it what it is, it's just resonance and frequency. What they find now is that particles and antiparticles in opposite spin in the quantum and in the cosmic. This is fantastic because they're finding counter rotation. Look at this. Radio astronomers compared their new very large array measurements of the motion of silicate oxide. Silicate oxide, this quartz molecules, close to a young star with earlier measurements of other molecules further away. Then they realize that two are actually orbiting the star in opposite directions. They're spinning in opposite directions. They're just describing the perfectly balanced toroidal field in space with an accretion disk spinning in opposite direction. Opposite spin in quantum particles and galaxies, and this is it. So it is not surprising to find counter rotation in a protostellar disk, since the phenomenon has been previously reported in disks of galaxies. At the quantum level, spin and opposite spin, they're giving them these weird names, but yet they're finding this at the very large level in galaxies. And this is the insanity of science becomes insane when finally the double-slit experiment comes to the rescue. And we realize that there are no particles, they're just frequencies. But when you observe the activity in a double-slit experiment, the particles remain. This is interesting. So it seems that everything is just a vibration and frequency until we look at it and observe it. And then it takes on this particle substance. It becomes matter. It becomes physical for us to see. It seems like our consciousness and the observation actually converts the resonance around us into physical manifestation of particles. So when we're not looking at something, is it really there? Or just when we turn our head, that wall suddenly appears. But when I'm not looking at it, it's not there. It's like when you play a computer game. Only what's on the screen is there. As you move around, it comes into reality. It's getting interesting, isn't it? So, electrons, what do you see? It's just a resonance frequency. Nikola Tesla said he didn't believe in electrons. I'm going to speed this up. Even Albert Einstein said electrons are a problem. They just cannot exist based on our understanding of energies. Edward Leeds Cullinan, builder of Coral Castle, says that millions of people all over the world have been fooled by the non-existing electrons. So, I'd like to remind you, there are no particles, everything originates in a toroidal field of resonance. Electron is simply a coherent resonance in the toroidal field. Toruses, electrons are toruses, atoms are toruses, molecules are toruses, solar systems are toruses, galaxies are toruses. The Earth cannot be the exception to the rule. I'm going to leave you to ponder that. It's a very interesting problem that we face right now. I think that the fractal, multidimensional, toroidal nature of reality looks probably more something like this. And another beautiful image I just found recently is this interconnectedness of toruses. This is just beautiful. And this is also when you look at sci-fi movies and they go from here somewhere else and they go through the wormholes or through the stargates. They don't go straight, right? It's always... You noticed it in movies? They know exactly how it works. They know exactly what space is. Space is not a vacuum, cannot be a vacuum. It's got to be something like this, because everything manifests in toroidal fields. This is what it's going to be like. So we got to rethink about what space is, and can we really go into space? Have we ever actually gone into space? No. And when you speak to some of these whistleblowers, they will tell you that what I'm sharing with you here is probably much closer to the truth than we've ever seen anything in NASA or sci-fi movies. So finally, Michelson-Morley experiment basically proves the existence of the ether was not there. The problem was that the Earth does not move through space. Therefore, there's no ether. And that problem remains today. Even Michio Kaku goes on record and says, look, you can look at all the evidence from NASA, but there's no real scientific evidence that we can use as proof that the Earth is moving through space. So there's a big problem for us. This guy here, Professor Max Tegmark from MIT, he's like the biggest deal in astrophysics. He was working on the cosmic background microwave radiation for many years, and in 2014, I think it was, they finally released the background cosmic radiation information, and it says, very clearly shows us that the Earth is at the center of the universe. Everything spins around the Earth. This is not what they expected. This is not popular science information. They don't know what to do with this. In fact, when you watch this documentary, The Principle, the poor guy lifts his hands, shrugs his shoulders and says, I don't know what to make of this information. It's just too weird. And I think based on this, I'd like to end by saying that unified field theory of Einstein and that unified theory of everything can very elegantly be compounded and brought forth in this fractional toroidal field structure. I think we've shown enough evidence here how everything manifests in toroidal fields, from sound, from light, subatomic particles, toruses are everywhere. And I would suggest that space looks more like this than anything else we've ever seen in a sci-fi movie. And I really kept you here for much longer than I intended. So thank you for being patient. Go away, take this information, do with it what you want. But be careful how you share this with others, because they might think you've gone insane. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. Please go online and tell your friends that I'm on a 16-city tour around the USA. Tell them to come and see me in a city near wherever they are. It's on my website. Thank you very much.